But Heavy D6 is here. I see Frank is hanging out there lurking, the king of chat gang. So I think that's good enough. Good evening, everyone. I am the magical Mr. Mephisto, the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar. I'm joined tonight by the Godfather, I think, of Age of Sigmar content. No, he's shaking his head. No, Tyler Emerson.
No, not even by a long shot. That's very kind, but not even by a long shot.
Not even by a long shot. The other title I was supposed to give you was the most intelligent man in Age of Sigmar.
No, you're way off there too. But
no,
you try it if you want. You're really gonna have to tone it down.
You're gonna have to tone it down. One of the most intelligent men in all of Age of Sigmar.
Still too much.
Still too much. Anyway, I am joined by Tyler Emerson tonight. How's it going, Tyler?
Good, man. It's great to finally be on here.
Good, yeah, it is. I feel like we've been trying to kind of set this up for a little bit there, kind of since RantCast started. And hey, man, life's life, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but so tonight we're actually gonna, as part of this Adepticon from Home movement, we're gonna do lists, because lists are tons of fun. Everyone loves lists. So we're gonna be doing sort of our top 5, bottom 5 battle plans. Before we get into all of that, I think we got to set some sort of context of like what we're talking about when we say top 5 versus bottom 5. What we think makes a good. This is a personal. I think this is very, very heavy on the personal opinion and sort of philosophy side of things. We're not fully getting like sort of like deep into like, oh, this is all the only way battle plan should be, and none of that. But just some sort of guiding hand. Or I guess what's your take when we're talking the best versus worst? Like what are people going to expect tonight?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost that we're going to be talking about match play, battle plans, and the context of tournaments, match play tournaments, competitive tournaments. What if you were running an event, a tournament, 2-day, 5-round, what would be your top 5 choices, and also in what order? Mm-hmm. What would be your first round, second round, etc.?
Okay.
And then least favorite as well, I think in that same context, what are the scenarios you would like to see the least at tournaments?
Right.
And there's probably some obvious ones in there, and maybe some not so obvious ones.
Right. So I before we get into that though, I do want to do a little bit of a background. So as much as you love being flattered, I'm gonna help your ego out a little bit more here. I don't think RantCast exists if it weren't for our encounter at Nashcon, by the way.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
So
yeah, that was an amazing conversation we had that first night.
Yeah, that first night, and like I didn't like it took me a while to like figure out like content creators and I know at that point like Scruby and Wells was in hiatus, so it wasn't like active in the parlance. But what had like I just met this cool guy. I was talking to you, and I'd seen you on Warhammer Weekly, which is kind of my first exposure to you. And for me, you really are the gold standard of Warhammer Weekly guests.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So like this is really awesome for me. But like we had that conversation. I remember this thing you said to me was like you really liked how open I was about the mental health side of things.
Yes.
And
yeah, absolutely.
That, believe it or not, was like kind of this pat on the back I needed to make something more concrete. Because I get back from Nashcon, of course, like that same weekend is when we get the Ossiarch Bonereaper trailer that just me and Brendan Melnick were sitting in the hotel room we stopped on the night back. Sunday night we stopped in the hotel room and we're both watching these videos on his phone, just like, this is the best thing. We're just like losing our minds. And like, so I get home.
First off, I'm sorry that you're having to share a hotel room with Brendan Melnick. I don't know if I can do that, but
he goes to sleep really early, which for like I'm an insomniac, and like I'm like, okay, now what do I do? Like I'm just I gotta, because like you want to be nice to somebody, like so I can't watch like videos on my phone like all night. I can't leave the TV on, so you just kind of like basically thumb through Twitter all night long is what you did till you fall asleep.
Is he up to 8:30 yet, or?
I think he's pushing 9 now. I think
pushing 9. Okay.
D&D with Ty has like pushed him up towards like 9 o'clock.
Okay. Well, my dad, who's nearly 60, is 8:30, so
8:30.
Maybe he'll get there in another year.
Laugh my ass off, you jerks. so of course Brendan's here at Chat Gang tonight with us. But yeah, so like no, it really was. It was like it was kind of the perfect storm because like I was really only doing like just off and on Twitch stuff by that point in time, and then when Ossiarch Bonereapers come out, I'm like, I basically grab Haywo and I'm like, I have to talk about this on the internet, and that was really where RantCast started.
Nice.
So, but like having it, I needed that like you kind of like, I don't know if you really realize it, but you kind of gave me this pass to be me, and then it was
yeah, man.
So I really appreciate that. You and AOS
Absolutely.
Coach was also a big part of that journey. So thank you so much, man. I just had
Very
to
cool.
I had to. So now you all know the origin story. I think in perpetuity, in full. For how Age of Sigmar RantCast became a thing. Everybody in chat gang. There you go. The whole story. All right.
Yeah.
You ready to talk about Battleplans, man?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So, you being the guest, I'm gonna go ahead and let you. We're gonna go back and forth. We're gonna. Well, no. Actually, before we do that, like, we'll talk about philosophies, principles of design.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'll let you take over. So, sort of, what is, obviously Battleplans. It's sort of it established our win condition for the game of Age of Sigmar.
Right.
But it also is that sort of. Always talk about playing the game in 3 dimensions. I don't mean literally 3D. I mean in decision making. It's not just a linear if-then. It's a lot more of that sort of spreadsheet of situational. It gets really cerebral, and how that all for me crystallizes in a battle plan. What is that? What's, I guess, for you? How would you characterize battle plans? What are you? Yeah.
So, yeah, before the show, we had talked about it's relevant to try to convey some of our respective assumptions and biases, my favorite words, as always.
Right.
Yeah, and because that can hopefully give folks a sense of why they might disagree with us when we say something that they think is stupid, because we may have different assumptions.
Right.
There's not necessarily going to be hard edges on any of this. So, yeah, I thought it was important, first and foremost, to try to convey what are some of our respective sort of underlying views, first principles. And, I mean, to kick off one that is, I think, pretty common for a lot of tournament players, sort of an anti-randomness bias, or at least an anti-too-much randomness bias. That's why relocation orb, for example, is not a favorite among most folks.
Right.
And there's a set of scenarios that, have higher variance in randomness. Randomness in the sense of, for example, let's take relocation orb where it's moving around the table depending on what dice roll you get, and then by comparison, shifting objectives, which at least in my mind is a little less random, an opportunity maybe for a little more control, maybe not.
Yeah, I actually on like Star Strike for me is it has the appearance of being stupendously random, but in play it doesn't always end up stupendously random. You know that first objective is going to come down center along a line, and then from there,
new Star Strike.
New Star Strike, right? New Star Strike.
Right.
New Star Strike mitigates that randomness, I think, by kind of going, it's going to be along this line here. So if you creep up on that line, most stuff can swing 18 inches one direction or another pretty handily. And so you're kind of setting yourself up to like catch the star that first time in Star Strike, and then from there it gets like wacky. So they've done some stuff to mitigate some of these randomness. I think Relocation Orb is the one that just like spirals out of control very quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So go on.
Yeah, so what's one of your... let me give you one more, then I'd love to hear some of your assumptions. So I'd say another bias that I have, Vince talks a lot about this from a both game design and sort of game play experience standpoint, the difference between interactive play experiences versus non-interactive play experiences. I have a bias toward favoring offense over defense, not favoring scenarios where, at least in my mind, there's a distinct greater likelihood of, for example, alpha bunkering strategies working. Alpha bunkering, if I'm sure most folks are watching, they're familiar with that concept, but where, for example, let's say you use the magmic tunneling from your Rune Smiter deployed off the board with 20 Hearthguard Berserkers, and you then put those in your opponent's face, or you put them on one of the middle objectives in Border War, one of the middle 2 objectives. But yeah, there are a number of armies that can deploy pretty strong alpha bunkering strategies that depending on the matchup, can make it very difficult for, I'd say, duality of death right now in terms of scenarios that are being played a fair amount or have been played a fair amount in tournaments, where you'll see that in some matchups because it's only 2 objectives and it's oriented around scoring for battle line and hero.
Right. Yeah. One of my things is I know this is, usually when we talk tournament, we're often talking about attuned, there is a sort of assumption of competition at a tournament, right? Now, that, of course, I do think most people show up for a tournament for just unbelievable excuse to play 5 games of Age of Sigmar. Hang on one moment. Yeah, unbelievable. Thank you so much for that follow there, Kicker. Sorry. Got to do the radio voice anytime I can. Also, welcome to Chat Gang, everyone. I see we're real busy tonight, popping off. Dan, Matter, Coach as usual, Fluke Skywalker, Andrew Yells, my boy, Tomb King Tristan. Wow, Brendan obviously earlier. Thank you everybody for joining us for this great night. I think that there's an approachability element to objectives that doesn't often get quantified. Like when I walk up to my first, second, third tournament, having that moment where you read the battle plan and go, which one is this, right? And even me, like a pretty experienced, savvy player, I have that moment to go, oh yeah, that's the one with the staircase deployment, and shake my fist at the air. I think there's an approachability aspect to battle plans that when you.
That's a great point. Like I think a better part of valor in that context, because I suspect that better part of valor, all else equal, that can be higher variance dependent on player skill. Those who are better at math and better at thinking about when should I be burning objectives, when should I not be, versus more casual players who are thinking less about that, but who want to have a good time at a tournament.
Right.
Not that that's necessarily a reason not to do better part of valor, but there's probably a little more skill variance and decision-making, thinking in that one than your average one.
And I'm not saying making it more casual or more casual battle plans. I just mean you're playing 5 of these. You don't want all 5 of them, even for the experienced player, to be like, I'm busting out calculus every single event time. And we talked about it in the context of 5 we put in our pack in order. I think that approachability aspect is something to consider.
That's a good one.
When you're arranging your pack and stuff, you don't want every single one of them to be the staircase deployment. You don't want every single one of them to. I want you to get your game set up quickly. I want you to look at where the objectives are, look at your opponent's army, and go, okay, I know how to play this. To have that snap. And a lot of times, I think a good objective is a good battle plan is one where you go, I know how I'm going to play my army. I almost don't care what they're doing. And I almost and then you react in the moment and you take some of that pressure off of the setup aspect of the game, which is the second most time consuming aspect of our game.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
what are some of your own, so that's a good one. Any others come to mind in terms of, and partly how I think about this is, what are the elements that contribute towards sort of optimal Age of Sigmar experiences? Like you're really raising the bar on the general experience across the number of players at a tournament.
So I have a hard number for objectives I want to see on the table, and that's 3. I believe I actually have I wanted to see 3 objectives on the table because I figure 8 objectives is kind of nightmarish to me because the armies I happen to play, but some people love that. It's chaos personified. But I do have a hard number on the low end. When I see 2 objective battle plans, I just go, gross. One of my expectations or one of my biases is I have just this hard number where I won't even begin to read your battle plan if it's 2 objectives. Like GHP comes out with new battle plans and I see 2 objectives in the book. It's just some brand new battle plan. I'm just gonna immediately have this this knee-jerk gross reaction. I like to see more battle plans more objectives on battle plans as opposed to less in general. I think there might be I've established the floor at 3. I don't think I've quite established the ceiling yet. 8 feels like we're getting towards it. 10 might be the ceiling on objectives I think is acceptable.
Yeah.
But like just absolutely third rail, do not touch 10
Yeah.
objective battle plans. But like
Yeah,
3 is certainly a minimum. And then from there it's I used to think of battle plans as like, I still think of battle plans as a great equalizer. I used to think of them as an army build equalizer. I don't believe that so much anymore. Like, they are an equalizer in terms of, like, they can mitigate sort of, the filthiest army can be mitigated by a certain battle plan, right? Like, Total Commitment, for instance, might make Tzeentch a lot more palatable in a tournament scene, right? Change Host, specifically. Might make them more palatable. Seraphon. Right, like, well, no, that's teleport, not deployment. Never mind. Never mind. No, it doesn't make them more palatable. It only punishes Stormcast Eternals.
And Nighthaunt,
and
which
Nighthaunt.
clearly Stormcast and Nighthaunt need to be punished.
Yeah, no, it only punishes them. Never mind. Conceivably,
I mean, it does affect Fire Slayers, which is, generally speaking, net positive, I would say, but yeah.
Duality of Death, Places of Arcane Power are, like, two of the ones that, at one point in time, I went, oh, you're going to want a minimum amount of heroes to play this thing, and so on and so forth. I don't think that way so much anymore. I don't think you tailor lists completely to things like that, like I felt like I did before. So when I say, like, army equalizers, I don't mean at the list building phase so much anymore, because I think the game, the way the game has moved, we tend to, when we build our lists, kind of have a good understanding of how many units we need in an army. You know, we started to really grasp that anyway. You know, Khorne's gonna load up on heroes. Death is, if you're on the Nighthaunt side of thing, you're gonna load up on heroes. If you're on the LON side, you're gonna tighten up on your heroes. Like, it's just, and battle line, because the 3 battle line requirement, you're kind of always paying that tax anyway. It's changing how you build your army lists. Where armies that have good battle line are good, and armies that don't have good battle line are bad. So, like, it's not the equalizer in the way I used to think at the list building step, because I think list has become its own mini game.
Yeah, I could see it in the, certainly still relevant in the aggregate. I think a good tournament will have a set of 5 missions that require a range of orientations, sort of require being capable of winning under a variety of conditions. And so that can be the number of objectives, and that's a big one. It can be a number of elements. So that's why you'll almost always see, usually nowadays, Places of Arcane Power in about every tournament pack. 2-day 5-round tournament pack, or maybe 3 Places of Power might sneak in there as an alternate. Yeah. But because of the hero orientation. So that's a way you can get the kind of balance in the aggregate.
Right. And so, like, I used to think it like, I moved it off the list and onto, like, the actual play now, is where I've begun to see the equalization more so. Because people tend to have a problem unit in their army, right? It doesn't matter what the army is. Everyone's got something. For the most part. Sorry, Sylvaneth. Everyone else has something for the most part. Hammers and anvils are pretty classic design philosophy. So a lot of people, even not the most experienced player, they're looking for the hammer in their list. They're looking for the anvil in their list. Now, if you're on the super galaxy brain list builds, you're looking at 3 and 4 threats, 3 and 4 things that you need to deal with, right? But when it gets right down to it, when you move the objectives up from that, like, my arbitrary 3 value, you're saying that you might have problem.unit on the table that I can't deal with, but it can only be in one of 5 relevant places. It can only be in one of 4 relevant places and one of 3. And so what ends up happening, the more objectives you add to the table, the more you dilute people's armies, and the more honest they start to have to kind of play the game. You can't be everywhere at once.
I generally agree with that. Yeah.
Generally. Obviously, like any hard and fast rule like this or generalization, there's probably some exception, but for the most part, Ossiarch Bonereapers, I'll go ahead and be specific here. I can basically be in 2 strong places that you will never beat me. I am in these 2 places. But now you add a third. Now I'm starting to stretch. Then now you had 5 objectives. 5 objectives is really a great equalizer for Ossiarch Bonereapers.
Yeah, and another thing I think for TOs to consider is what's the state of the meta.
Right.
In relation, particularly win percentages. Now we know that win percentages have some inherent challenges with the nature of the data that most of us are relying upon, but I think generally there's enough signal there that we can extrapolate, pretty good assessment to help in our thinking about which scenarios to choose. So if you look at right now, the top of the meta, you've got Tzeentch, Fire Slayers, Daughters of Cain is still up there, OBR is of course up there. 3 of those 4, Doc, OBR, Fire Slayers, have a similar pattern.
Mm-hmm.
They have a sort of a limited number of hammers that also function as anvils.
Right.
One of the, I think, inherent, long-standing, recurring, systematic challenges with the game are these units that combine both too much offense and too much defense. Like, again, Vince and Tom have talked a lot about this. You need to pick one, like make OBR really offense or really defense. Don't make them both.
I think that's the cardinal sin of Petrifex Elite is really what's going on. Even if I think it's a problem or not, it just philosophically having the punchiest thing be the tankiest thing will always create a little bit of a disconnect in my brain. Again, whether I think the army's a problem, it's just going, when you have the punchiest thing also be the anvil is the hammer, like, that just it goes against one of those like core principles, like when you're just first getting into Age of Sigmar, like, oh, it's all about hammers and anvils, and you're like, but the hammer is the anvil. Right. It's just like, how do I deal with this? What
I was getting at is that if you think about the current meta with those 3 among the top 4, and I know there's more that you could I think you could extrapolate to say that certain builds within these factions are stronger than the win percentages let on. Like, there's a number of, I'd say, Cities of Sigmar builds that are incredibly strong.
Oppressive. Like, there are some oppressive builds. And we're not talking about the War Clans menace right now, exactly, but there's some there's some pretty oppressive builds in there too. So
but anyway, so if you take Doc, Fire Slayers, and OBR, they have these hammer plus anvils that you can make choices to make things a little more difficult for them as you were getting on. And right now, the answer is more objectives on the table to stretch them out more.
Yeah. I mean, there's a concept like Halo we'll talk about, but essentially tempo in Age of Sigmar. Time as a resource in Age of Sigmar. Something that, like, I think seasoned players are aware of, but I don't think it's in the common parlance of how we talk about the game. But time as a resource. There's only 5 rounds, right? And once you begin to realize, I'm not talking about time as in the round clock boss. Like, I'm talking about time as in the number of rounds, the number of turns you get. Realizing that the killy hammer anvil of death is only going to be in one place a turn in the absolute optimal, scenario. Like, it can be to 5 different places on the table every turn. Okay, that is its ideal best case scenario. So disrupting its tempo or its time, it becomes a strategy. This is what we've started calling, it's not just chaffing. Chaff is more like protection, but actually speed bumping people, which is why I think we've tried to shift the vernacular. Putting something 4 inches, like just stretching out a line of idiots 4 inches away from something, saying you either have to charge it or go around. Like, this is going to cost you tempo. This is going to cost you time. And when you have more objectives on the table, that becomes a more viable strategy. When it's still 2 objectives, you go, I'm cutting a line straight towards that thing, and I'm going to pile in as multiple times. I'm going to try to make the big charge and wrap around. You're the same strategy of beating the speed bump when it's 1 objective versus 3 objectives now they need to get to. You kind of dilute that counterplay there by narrowing the amount of objectives. So
yeah, absolutely, good point.
Yeah,
cool, man. Well, I think that's a pretty good setup.
Yeah. So I think we so you all know now kind of like our biases. I think. Is there anything that like you just like completely just dislike? You just don't like it. Is there like just as a mechanical or as in reference to Battleplans, just something that you don't? Deployment wise, is there anything you're just like, this is not like, I just don't like this?
That's a good question. Let's see. I really resonate with your point about tending to not favor scenarios that have 1 or 2 objectives. We're going to get into one scenario in particular that's still a favorite among many.
Right.
And we'll have a good debate on that one. But let's see. So we've got deployment, different deployment orientations. I mean, we're seeing a little more prevalence of the 9-inch, 15-inch from the back, 15-inch up, so 9-inch between us, 18 inches total between us.
Yeah.
In a game that has increasingly gotten faster over the
Yes.
years, that I think is pushing in the wrong direction. Would love to see, more orientation around the 12, the traditional 12, than 15.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I feel like there is an intent there to like speed up the game, getting people to engage on turn 1 and turn 2. But not all army. But what that I feel why that has become a bad thing is not all armies are created equal in terms of number of deployments. Quite simply, and I think that is exacerbated by the 18-inch threat, essentially, right? Like 18-inch. Like that's just not enough of a buffer, considering how many. Quite simply, like 3 drops. A lot of 3-drop armies out there, and then armies that'll just never get below 5 to operate correctly. So I think that kind of like to me that like what that sort of shrunken threat range going basically to 18-inch threats versus 24-inch threat. What that has done is it's really kind of exacerbated some of the list building boss steps. Like you got to beat the list building boss battle first, and then you have to beat the deployment boss, and like you see, you've actually like exacerbated this existing issue. So I guess what I'm saying, really long way of saying I could see it. I don't like odd deployments. It's my there's no I have no rational explanation for it. I'm sure there's fantastic reasoning. So like just on a arbitrary dislike, I don't like weird I don't like the staircase deployments. They bother me. And so we're going to see this when I needed to prime people for this when I talk about some of my least favorite objectives later, and or least favorite battle plans, and you're going to see it in there. It's like the deployment pushes me over the edge on not liking it.
Yeah, right on. Absolutely. That's one of it reminds me of, maybe we get into this at a future point. We were discussing the prospects of an effort to curate and or create community scenarios, or community created, curated scenarios that could try to get an effort of number of folks, number of TOs maybe get involved to put together a set of 6 scenarios. There's a number of variables, that you could look to modify just with the existing battle plans. You don't even have to necessarily come up with completely new battle plans, but there's so many variables that you could tweak to really create unique experiences just building on these existing plans.
Right. I mean, just dialing back a threat range, for instance, right? Completely changes the dynamics of a battle plan.
Absolutely.
And by threat range, I'm using jargon. I mean that sort of that space between my zone and your zone, right? Like that, shrinking that or extending that.
Right. One thing I think would be interesting, again, on that would be, I mean, it has to be done carefully. I sent you Chris Welfare's Sydney Slaughter pack from last year.
Okay.
Where he created custom scenarios. I sent it on Discord. You may not have seen it yet. But yeah, it was, at least for my money, the best example that I've seen of these custom scenarios. If anyone's interested, just Google Sydney Slaughter events or Sydney Slaughter custom scenarios. You should be able to find the PDF, or it's on Facebook. Just search for Sydney Slaughter. And yeah, so he had, for a few of them, he was using the Behemoth is worth 10 more models, or in this one, Hero is worth 10 more models. And I think that's another interesting variable that you have to be careful, because you don't necessarily, there can be some challenges in trying to do that.
Now you take a Stonehorn and it's worth 20 models, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You'd have to have an asterisk on that. Yeah, this doesn't, no, you guys already get your fun with worth 10 models. You don't get to double up on it, but anyway. There's a bunch of those variables.
That's a fun variable. Or I like a top around, bottom of round scoring. I would love to play.
That's another one.
I would love to play with that a lot more. One of the, I think, community accepted worst like battle plans has that, and like you don't see it anywhere else. I'm like, why does the one that we don't like the most have the mechanic I personally would love to see a lot more of?
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Why isn't that in something else? Capturing if you control X objectives. We've got 2 of those, right? To my mind, I mean, the minor loss if I don't control, like it, I don't know. It's it's such an all or nothing. I think that's one of those interesting design spaces, but I wonder what that would look like
Mm-hmm.
by putting that on different sort of configurations of where the objectives fall. How
Yeah.
would that affect it? Like if you know, for instance, like Knife to the Heart. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
distant objective-wise. You have to commit to going in and getting that point. What if they're closer, but you need to get all 4 or 5? You know, what kind of melee does that cause? You know, if it's like focal points, but you need to capture 3 of them to instantly win.
Right.
You know, something weird. Playing around with numbers like that to force like sort of kill zones and interaction on the table. I think that's a fun little dial to twist sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk more about that later. Yeah, there's, like I said, a lot of dials that you can turn, orthogonal aspects to existing plans, you know, ways to change things up, push against the grain. Scott Sproul, a friend of mine, he had a couple of good suggestions in that regard. You know, take shaping objectives and add a line breaker component to it. You could just do a number of things.
By line breaker, what do you mean, by the way?
Meaning it's incentivizing you to get into your opponent's deployment.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And do something as opposed to just function in the middle of the board.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So just orthogonal.
So if it scores when it's deeper in, like it's. You know,
it could be that. It could be secondary.
Yeah.
Or it could be another thing.
I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent here, but talking about like sort of TO additional packs, you know, a TO sort of sponsored, I guess, battle plans. I mean, this is in that vein of like with homebrew in D&D, you have to be really, really careful looking at somebody's homebrew class or feats, because their sort of gauge of balance isn't often as healthy as, like, say, like a Vince Venturella, who
totally
has been employed in designing games, right? Like, so I think there'd be like having a useful like sort of TO approved pack for like additional battle plans. I think that's pretty important. Like, it not just like not to devalue input from the community, but like community does the thing, and then like the TOs and players and all those, like everyone like looks at it and go, okay, is this functional would be the first thing. We've seen some like custom scenarios where like you actually can't score it, you know, like off the way it's written and stuff. Like, it's just going through some like basic litmus tests like that to go, hey, does this fit? And then having sort of these like this TO resource, I think is a really cool. I think that's a really cool, perhaps future RantCast topic. So I just wanted to like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was talking with Brendan about this a number of weeks, or actually months ago now, of we have that great effort that, okay, this is our last tangent, and we need to move on to the battle plans. That Chuck and a bunch of folks in the community that they put together, I don't know if you've seen it, it was this modular AOS United US community pack, and many different modules, painting, scoring, sportsmanship, all kinds of things. But kind of building on that and doing something that might be a little more concise and focused in a specific way around, like these core elements for a TO, especially sort of a little more constrained, like guidelines on terrain placement. That's not necessarily something that's obvious to everyone when they're thinking about how to do that well. Maybe thoughts on the terrain features might be another, the damned, mystic, etc. might be another one to consider. And then certainly, some of these other, a set of 5 or 6 scenarios that have gone through a process of getting reviewed input by TOs in the community, and then they come to consensus on, we feel strongly enough about these scenarios to put our stamp of approval on them collectively, and then an effort to try to do that on an annual basis as our own community effort that goes along with the General's Handbook that comes out every year. See, I don't know, it could be an interesting project.
No, I love this because I think it keeps the focus on the community, and I think I maintain the community is really the best aspect of this game. The community's, in fact, bigger than the game for me. Look at what's going on right now. We're not gaming right now, but the community is still sort of united in sort of a common enjoyment of the game right now, even though we're not throwing dice around. So I think that's really, really significant, really important. Having like just like a, like a little like direct line up for like, hey man, I want to make this I think this would be great to see in TO, and you're just
Mm.
random community member, and you just write a scenario, and you think it's just this battle plan is great, and you send it up through the the council of this goes in the rando pack like that that every TO can use. I think that's a good component of community engagement where you're essentially helping shape the match play. And match play seems like kind of this fixed point. You can't mess with it. We got to wait for GW to. But to take some onus over that, I think is just really. I think that's really cool. I think that's really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having an app.
Yeah, we're trying to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we wanted to try to get a little bit of that going on with the schemes. I sent out that notice, those tweets on a couple of days ago, just inviting folks to, if anybody hasn't seen that. So Vince, Tom, David Griffin, and I, David Griffin, TO of Nashcon, we worked on, especially Vince and Tom, worked on a set of schemes that are essentially secondaries, and we want to refresh them this year. So we're inviting anybody to send us their proposed schemes or tweaks to existing ones as part of the effort to refresh this, because it's something that, again, it's a module that you can just bolt on if you so choose to your tournament, and it'll be part of a sort of, the cards they'll be well designed, they'll look great, easy to print out, give them to your players, they have something physical and tangible, and they'll also be in a PDF that gives you more context, recommendations to consider on how many points to associate with a scheme, and other things like that. So would love to just reach me on Facebook or Twitter, or tyleremerson@gmail.com if anybody has any thoughts on proposed schemes. Love to see them.
Yeah, the schemes I mentioned in my Nashcon recap, that's like a way deep cut on the RantCast there. I loved the schemes, and
cool, man.
Yeah, I loved them. I did get Curse of Kings, I believe it was, and that's
Tomb King's Curse. Nice.
Tomb King's Curse. That one just stands out in my mind because it was this. It wasn't a gimme. Like the triumphs in GW's like little PDF they released there. They're so either like win mores or like automatic, or like some REs just will never get certain ones. It's like but with that Tomb King's Curse, you're having to really think about it. Like, okay, this is my unit that I gotta get killed, and then I need it to be killed by a thing that I don't want to engage it, and then your opponent's like, they know that you now have the curse because you have to dimension it, and they're just trying to throw that thing in your face to get it killed. Like, it adds this dynamic to the game. In match play, even, where you're kind of bringing in this other, dare I say, like almost a narrative component and really amping up the game.
Yeah. It's fascinating because Nashcon has become, I would say, known for, it seems to have maintained so far, at least, a good balance of the sort of serious competitive. A lot of competitive folks come to Nashcon, bring really strong lists. You've got the 2-list format, and then yet it's maintaining this amazing casual atmosphere as well. And so for example, we don't hear a lot of complaining about these schemes, and some of these, for the most, it's overwhelming support and appreciation and enjoyment of these, at least based on what we've heard collectively over the however many 3 years that Nashcon's been going on. So that's a little not necessarily surprising, but that's not a guarantee that would be the outcome. Because some of these things they do change the game a fair amount, and they're also worth a lot. Like in Nashcon's pack specifically, major is 15, a minor is 10, minor loss is 7, I believe, 5, maybe it's 5, and a major loss is 0. But each game is worth 10 points. It's the equivalent of a minor victory. Yeah. That's a big impact on rankings.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, like, whilst you said it kind of meant it can warp the dynamic of the game, it's not like you're suddenly playing the game completely differently, though. Totally. And I think that's very important, that you're not like just suddenly like turning your models on their heads and pushing them. Like nothing truly, some of the predictive ones are great. Like pick a terrain piece at the beginning of the game, basically. That is the altar of Khorne. Murder the most stuff around it. Like there's like cool stuff like that. So I think it's cool. It's just basically essentially encouraging you to like look at the game in a sort of like gamey, interesting way. Pardon me.
Absolutely.
Hey, chat gang. See a lot of you joining. Alex, hey, Colleen. Why are we not lifting weights while we're talking right now? Because only one man is capable of like lifting weights and painting and like flexing at them to dry them.
Mm.
Did you catch a strength hammer,
No,
Shuxer?
I'm gonna
Oh
go.
man,
I'm gonna go back late tonight and check out some of it.
he was doing like air squats while painting a model, and I'm like, I can barely do one or the other, and he's just
Yeah.
like, and then he flexed and it dried the model, like it just like.
That's hilarious.
All right, so here we go. Why don't you kick us off with your I've actually got a right now, if you're watching here in Twitch, or watching it back on YouTube later, I've actually got focal points sitting up here, and this was just from like kind of talking about the topic tonight. Focal points I think came up for both of us on our best list, so we might as well just focus on this one real quick.
Okay.
But I'll let you. So we both picked focal points. Why don't you tell me why it's the best and should be in every pack?
Okay. So I'll say now, and we were talking about giving the order in which we would choose if we were TOing a 2-day match play competitive tournament or whatever, match play tournament, whether you're there to be casual or semi-competitive or competitive, whatever. I would choose this as the 5th and final game because focal points is king of Age of Sigmar right now. The belt was in the hands of Border War for ever since it came out. It's been, I'd say, the maybe not overwhelming favorite, but certainly majority favorite in the community for a long time. You see it all over the place, and it's still amazing. But yeah, the focal points pips it by a little bit for a few reasons. Mm-hmm. In terms of the 2018 or 2019, I think they're both great. I'd love to hear, Meth, if you have any particular preference. Maybe just real quickly in summary, do you have a preference on 2018 or 2019?
I actually like the old one a little bit better.
Okay.
It felt the sort of like the sort of all they did was twist it to the side, right? Like where the objectives are.
Yeah, 2018 is the place of arcane power.
Yeah.
Type deployment, and then they switched the scoring on it a little bit.
Right. So the orientation is what I kind of favored a little bit before, because I found that like the way tournament terrain tends to be set up is you usually have there's often some sort of centerpiece. Like quite often there's usually some sort of centerpiece. And by putting it on either side of that centerpiece is essentially what you were doing. You're forcing us to kind of go around or fly over. What focal points does on the current orientation essentially is it says kind of like put something on one side of the middle terrain piece, and then you're just gonna run straight across. And I feel like you had a little bit more of a like this a little bit more of this like sort of churning whirlpool of murder and in the old one, whereas now it's a little bit more like straight across. That would be my only critique of the new one, 2019 versus 2018.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. Yeah. So
that said, I love both. Because the way it scores, the number of objectives, and their sort of equidistance from each other, it forces you to engage. You must play this game. So. Yeah,
exactly. So, like, if you compare it to the old king in our minds, as we've talked of Border War with focal points, well, focal points has that extra objective in the middle. It also, so you could certainly come into matchups where your opponent outdrops you, gets the choice of going first. They alpha bunker on both objectives, and then they hold their own in their territory. And they have enough threats where they can have enough to hold up pretty well to keep their opponent off of their 4-point. Their opponent trying to come after their 4-point, and then hold pretty well early on those other two. To get up in the game where it can be difficult. Whereas when you've got that 5th objective, it stretches, again, it's the stretch that what we talked about earlier, it stretches you out a little bit more. Also with the nature of the scoring, it's not with Border War, you've got, of course, 2 points on the left in the middle, 2 points on the right in the middle, and then yours is 1, and your opponent to go after it is 4 points if you get it. That's great, but I tend to also favor the scoring of focal points a little more than that scoring.
Because focal points is giving you essentially opposing points give you more, like give you the most points, right? And so what ends up happening is sometimes you can lose a point whatever. Like you just happen to be outscored. Like the little, you happen to be outscored. The dice run hot in your opponent's favors. Any number of things happen. And what it forces you to do is it forces you to make like that bigger decision now to get those points back. And what I find this for me, focal points is like the heavyweight boxer, like of objectives where they're just trading. You're just trading these huge blows and like blocking. I really, it's all the like. I think every army, whether you're on something like IDK where you got probably the best alpha, still the best alpha in the game, in that it flies. When it gets right down to it, flying on the objectives and being able to put that pinpoint damage wherever. It's still kind of like the best alpha. I'd hear some cases against it, but for me, it comes down to the flying when we're talking objectives. You can have them fly in and do their trick, and then you still have 4 other points to consider, and the nature of how you score based on which points you control. And I think that really, something like that. Whereas even like if you do. I know you're kind of talking about like we don't like alpha bunker armies. We don't like alpha bunker armies. Well, some people do really love playing an attrition style game. Like they love that. Yeah. They love feeling like that battlefield tactician making minor changes and like sitting back and going like hold the western front and then send out the cavalry over here, right? Like they like that style of play. You still
and real quickly on that point, there's trade-offs because I'm forgetting the fellow who I think has literally gone to 3 major tournaments and won every single one in the UK or somewhere. And he's been playing IDK, specifically MSU, multiple small units IDK. So he's got a number. I think he's got 1 big unit of 6 offensive eels, Morsar Guard, maybe 2. But for the most part, he's got a bunch of the 1x3 Morsar Guard. He's got a couple of at least 1 unit of Thralls, maybe a unit of 20 or 2x10. But point being, he's got a number of units that, because of the mobility, can add up quickly to be a sizable threat when they do what eels do. They pounce on you.
Yeah.
And so he is favored in a meta that, or in this context that we're saying we're biased, or at least I'm certainly biased toward, of more objectives than fewer.
Right.
But there's trade-offs, because IDK on average is probably going to do better than Fire Slayers or OBR and some of these other
powerhouse
other factions.
Yeah. And again, like even the alpha attrition armies or the alpha bunker armies, they're going to be able to go. I'm gonna guarantee this point here. You're never going to take my 4 point off me. So now we're going to play the middle field, which favors attrition. Attrition armies tend not to be able to stick their necks out really strong. Fire Slayers is a freaking crazy, exception to that rule because they've got the teleport, right? But usually. But usually you're like, like old school LON with like just a bunch of skeletons, right? You're going to march your skeletons and you're going to kind of play the midfield and then maybe try to sneak around a unit of cavalry around the backs. The point is like even attrition armies get to like play their game and you're playing like so that, whether you're alpha, whether you're attrition or any of the range in between, you're shooting, everyone's playing their game.
Yes, and that's a good point.
And that's what I truly love about this one. This is
totally.
This is the king of battle plans for me. This is absolutely.
I agree. 100%. Yeah. It as you just said. I mean, nothing. It just enables a healthy variety of play styles, of strategic choices based on your list. Game planning, a variety of game planning, and I think it's a broader variety than Border War enables on average.
Right.
As the priority. Not that, again, Border War is still fantastic, but cool, man. So what is your, let's do least favorite. What's yours?
My absolute least favorite? I'm just going to do my first one. Okay. I'm going to go with Total Commitment.
Yeah.
And
on my list too. I think we're gonna have a lot of shit.
I think we're gonna. I've got one on here. I think you might disagree with for my best, but Total Commitment. Total Commitment is actually almost a really rad battle plan. Like it's almost like the weird sort of like 9-inch. What is it? 9 inches. Here, I'll pull it up real quick on my my little screen here. Let's see, will you?
Yeah, 9 inches from enemy territory.
Yeah. But it's almost. It's getting close to the correct amount of. Here we go. So Total Commitment. So you've got one objective. It's that staircase thing, which is kind of weird. So you got 1 6 up, 30 in, 6 in, 24 inch. So you've got like the sort of staircase. It's diagonal deployment. Then you have these sort of staircase objectives, which I kind of mentioned a little bit early on. I don't mind that in and of itself because you have plenty of real estate in the diagonal deployment to deploy your army correctly. If you got a Venn diagram or whatever. So like, I'm like, right now, you don't make me hate it yet. It's four objectives, and they're kind of deep in your territory.
Oh wait, are you talking about Total Conquest or Total Commitment?
Total Commitment 2019.
Total Commitment is the one that does not allow reserves. You have to deploy everything
Right.
on the board.
Yep. Still talking the same one. So
okay, cool.
So this is Total Commitment 2019.
Okay.
So but then so like it's almost like I said got the it's almost got this formula for being an okay scenario. That you score 1 for bunkering, basically 3 for marching across the table and stealing an objective. So I like that incentivizing you to go into it, but then they ruin it with no reserves, and this right here ruins this battle plan forever. Like as long as this is a rule on a battle plan, it is a bad battle plan. It negates like the only ability basically from Stormcast Eternals, and they don't need to be equalized. We're talking about like Place of Arcane Power incentivizing you to bring extra heroes and stuff like that. Like this just punishes somebody, and I'm always of the mind that you should reward, not punish shit. Like it's just to me, it's backwards. This is the difference of like bringing bad armies up and constantly, like if everyone's like, oh, this stuff is all too good, let's constantly bring it all down. Like you're gonna have a very lukewarm sort of experience. For the same reason, like no reserves punishes 2 armies that don't need to be punished, and why are you punishing anyone else? You should just be letting people have fun. So you're turning off abilities. Now, to put this in a slightly different context, what if this said, like, your army can't generate extra command points or summoning points? What if there was a battle plan that said you don't get summoning points?
Right. That would be. Yeah, I don't think a lot of folks would like that.
Yeah,
to say the least.
like you don't get summoning points. There we go. We write a battle plan. It says you don't get summoning points. Like we write one that says like we like pinpoint look at like some generic army rules and we like that a couple factions have and say like you don't get those on just this battle plan. It's not good design.
One thought as a way to potentially get a little closer toward addressing it, we'd have to think through who this might not catch that you're still affecting negatively or too negatively, would be to add the additional element under no reserves, that this does not apply to faction allegiances that have a rule that runs counter to it in their battle traits, which of course is Nighthaunt and Stormcast. I don't think anyone else had. Well, I say that actually. Sylvaneth does as well now. And again, that's another instance where I think you could make Sylvaneth comfortably an exception, part of the exception to this no reserves rule, and nobody would be the worse off for it.
It's just kicking the army. Beasts of Chaos also get hit by this. It's just hitting the armies that like statistically are basically the worst in the game. Off of caveats to the statistics aside, like it's just saying like you're already suffering. Here you go, and good like. It's just kicking armies while they're down. And like I said, it's almost a good battle plan, but then they just have this no reserves here. Imagine taking out no reserves and putting in no summoning. Like,
sure.
I mean, that would be almost less punishing because summoning tends to be something extra an army does, not something fundamental it does. Like with Nighthaunt or Stormcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that I think would help. We talked about earlier with Fire Slayers, of course. It would not allow them to tunnel, and I mean, generally, Fire Slayer players would be able to still be competitive in that scenario, even if they cannot tunnel. It might incentivize more Vostarg, which would be awesome to see, with the extra mobility. I was very impressed by Vostarg. I played against them a month or 2 ago. But yeah, I'd have to look at the list and see what armies might be affected that you would not want to affect with that change. But it seems like
shifted off the allegiance ability and onto the unit war scrolls or something would be an easy fix to Total Commitment. Like, okay, now Kinnerai can't deep strike. Ooh, like it's not something fundamental to the army that you're turning off. It's a bonus. It's an extra. Like whereas even turning off summoning is turning off something fundamental to an army. I have to assume that summoning is balanced into an army somehow, whether their heroes cost a little bit extra, opportunity costs for what they want to be doing instead. I have to assume that. But Sometimes they get the numbers wrong, but when it gets right down to it, like turning off something fundamental just seems wrong to me.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
All right, cool, man. So yeah, we're in agreement there. So moving on to my second pick for most favorite.
mhm.
I would probably go. So this would be for 2-day or be my choice of the first round scenario. If you have the space for Battle for the Pass, which is the long way deployment, and it has the kind of
Yeah.
somewhat funky triangle deployment, or you could the older version had the traditional straight across, or in this case, yeah, just going down the middle and you're going at each other that way. But longer table, deployment, more
Yeah.
space, and it's border war setup. Yeah, the two in the middle,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
one in yours, one in your opponent. So yeah, I'm a big fan of. I played that one a ton. We did that one at our last one dayer. That was the one we had 27 people show up from all over, and it's a. I think it's a really great scenario because of a longer deployment. Gives a little bit of a new element than the traditional border war.
The with the Battle for the Pass, you have
Mm.
this like visual. I think it's like a visually dynamic looking deployment too. Like you end up with like
Yeah.
classic spearheads and archers in the back. Like you have this really like the
Yeah, it
two
looks
armies
great.
are up on the hill. This is where like I actually have this as my on my honorable mentions.
Yeah,
I put Battle for the Pass on there. Like
yeah.
I would change if we had more deployments like this. I would actually change the setup if it were practical for tournaments where you shift you turn the table sideways and let people walk around them in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
This one is like one of those ones that's great at home and great in the tournament. The tournament can be a little wonky because you're usually like you're up next to somebody initially, but it doesn't take long for you to start ending up in the middle and then do what I call the blender. For me,
Right.
battle plans are great when the blender happens. That whirlpool of motion where you start to see like someone coming around this way.
Yeah.
Focal Points does that I think the best, but Battle for the Pass does that really well too. And
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be my choice if sort of physical constraints are a non-issue. You don't have any constraints, which again, it seems like most tournaments, as you would imagine, do. So outside of that, I'm a big fan of Total Conquest, and there's of course 2 variations. The prior Total Conquest did have the funky stepladder deployment. The new one is a lot more straightforward. It's the diagonal going from your left bottom of your deployment on the far right to the middle. So it's got that diagonal line there, and 24 inches in between the 2 deployment zones. 4 objectives. They're nice and spread out. Playing my silly 30 model Stormcast army, I sometimes struggle with this one because it spreads you out quite a bit, at least for low model count armies. And it has the scoring element, which makes for, I think, really often interesting back and forth long games.
Oh, there's go on.
Yeah.
Finish your point.
Yeah, for each objective the player controls, they score 1 victory point. But for each objective the player gained control of that turn that was previously controlled by their opponent, they get an additional victory point, so they score 2.
Yeah.
So it adds, I think, a really nice element for that. Usually this Total Conquest tends to go pretty long in my game, at least my personal games with it.
Right. No. So you went both Battle for the Pass and Total Conquest. So like our
Battle for as if you're not constrained by space, Battle for the Pass.
Okay.
If you are, Total Conquest.
Total Conquest. All right. Acceptable. I keep Total Conquest. I kept Total Conquest off my list, but only just barely.
Yep.
This is one of those gamey ones. Playing this one at PACA, which is the last tournament I was at before things. There was a decision. I was playing against Bone Splitters with my my filthy Bonereapers, and I had a rogue idol assault a block of 20 Mortek guards supported by some archers on the sort of no man's land objective in the bottom left of your screen that you can see there, Jack Gang. And I had this decision point where like I hadn't controlled it yet, but I could have piled into to like control it basically when it comes around to my turn because I hadn't moved into it yet. Like I could have piled around. So where to deny him the objective, but then go on to control it on my turn, and then consequently lose it. And I'm like, if I do this, I deny him 1 point and gain 1 point, but then I hand him a differential of points, and I'm not coming over here to get it back. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to pile in and take the objective, kill my stuff.
Yep.
And so I let him just get the 1 point. Then naturally he has to support the point and then move kind of in the L shape across the board and come over and attack me on my strong point. Like, it forces interesting decisions, and so I really
exactly. I think that's really cool.
I really like that. I really like that, and I just barely kept it off the list. Just barely.
And also, I'm going to say just for reference. I mean, this will give away, but maybe we'll get into it a little bit later in sort of the overall thoughts on our collective choices of 5. But I'm going to say it's probably fine. To me, Total Conquest, Border War, and Battle for the Pass, again, if you have the space that you can do it at a tournament, all fall into the same category of what I think would make for a fantastic first round game at a tournament. They're similar. All of them have 4 objectives. They have some unique elements, respectively, but they're kind of in that same category.
Yeah. So I like this is like a 2A and a 2B, basically.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm for it. So my number 2 is just Border War. I don't think we need to belabor the point. I still think it's I still think it's great. It's just not quite focal points as its greatest crime.
Right.
Paradoxically, I don't think you put both in a pack though. So that would be my own.
And that was why I left out Border War. Yeah.
I
thought Total Conquest is a little more, for the choice dynamics that you just mentioned, and
Where I would differentiate though is I would do Border Wars as a day 1, round 1. I would save focal points till day 2. If that was, that's really the only caveat I have to that is Border Wars feels like a day 1, focal points feels like a day 2.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love focal points as the last, as the 5th round.
Yeah,
I think it's perfect for that. Call to Glory, actually, CanCon, Call to Glory, this year, they had focal points as their last round.
Perfect. So then that puts us on the worst side of the spectrum.
Yeah, so what do you got?
I don't like Take and Hold at all.
Okay.
Take and Hold basically breaks every one of my rules of design, except for weird, wacky deployment. The only way to make Take and Hold worse is if you had a kill box deployment. So we'll go ahead and pull up Take and Hold real quick for those of you in chat gang. Take and Hold, 2 objectives. They are deep in your enemy territory, but if I'm an attrition army, I look at this and I go, I'm going to play for the minor, and I hate. But it's not. It doesn't stop there. It makes the stipulation of having to have 5 or more models to capture at all. So it's unnecessarily punishing, unnecessarily punishing elite armies. And I'm like, you don't need to additionally punish elite armies.
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. So this, on one hand, now that Stonehorns exist, if say Stonehorns are suddenly and I'm saying specifically Stonehorns, not mod tribes, specifically Stonehorn heavy builds. If they were the 70% win rate menace, I would suddenly say, okay, Take and Hold as far that, put it in every pack, so that way they get an auto L at every tournament, right? But that's not the case, and therefore I despise this one. It's got a ton of real estate for deployment, but it really is just kind of just a pissing contest of a whose dice are better and or whose list is better at the front, and it's just a litmus test for that. So I don't really like Take and Hold.
Yeah, this is I think the scenario that they used in the original AOS book when it came out for the recommended kind of first scenario that you would play to learn the game.
Cool.
So it's probably not really designed to
for a tournament. Yeah. It's fine. Yeah, I mean, if you're teaching someone, sure, but even then, I don't teach a kid to swim by having them lay on their belly on the ground first. I put them in water.
Sure.
And so, no, thank you. So what's your next worst?
Yeah, let's see. What did I have here? Okay. Well, let's get the obvious one out. We probably have to talk a lot about it.
All right.
The obvious one is Relocation Orb.
All right.
So we'll just get that one out of the way. I mean, it's certainly better. We're probably not going to say anything new that folks haven't heard elsewhere since the last GH come out. It's better. It's less random. It's still probably too random for your average tournament. It's perfectly fun and silly for your casual FLGS play, playing at a local game store or with your buddy at home or whatever. But yeah, it's not too keen on it. There's also the element. Actually, curious, Matt, your take on this in general. So of course, relocation orb. If you go first and you control, you score 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
If you go second in the rounds and you control, you'll score 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed in a number of games with relocation orb that can make quite a big difference in the scoring. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but do you think that is?
I don't think it saves it. Is the like
Yeah.
it's still too random. It does add some levity to the battle plan. They mitigated the randomness from what it had before. In a sense, you're kind of playing catch with relocation orb. You're going. I think it's going to be here. I'm going to move my units to get ready.
Yeah.
But like when it gets right down to it, not enough. It's just not enough. Relocation orb. I'm going to say something that maybe hasn't been said before. I think this is a great casual battle plan.
Oh yeah, no,
I
totally.
like if you're playing with a friend on the weekend that you haven't seen in like a couple months. He drives down from Minneapolis. I'm describing, by the way, a specific incident. He drives down from Minneapolis to hang out with you for a weekend, and you play relocation or Sylvaneth versus Legions of Nagash, and he's throwing trees around. He can't quite anticipate where he needs them, and I'm just like, bring on the skeletons. It's a blast at a tournament. It combines the approachability problem that I outlined earlier with kind of a weird deployment. Like you get your 24 inches, but like it's in that weird diagonal is what ends up happening, right? You have to establish the big diagonal, then you have to back it off the midline, and so you end up with that extra step. So you're adding these like you don't get to do all the things that annoy me in one battle plan, and they're starting to do all the things that annoy me in one battle plan, which is wacky deployment, random. It's light on objectives. Like it's just doing everything I don't like about an objective, and then the random kills it. I do love the victory point scoring at the bottom of the round, though. I want to see this in more. I want to see this in more like stagnant, not more stagnant, but less random battle plans. Like I would love to see that mechanic.
Do you think so? Let's say what would be an example of? Well, we've got shifting objectives, where it's just 3 objectives that hits the minimum that we both like for a number of objectives, and then whichever is the primary objective is 3 points versus the other 2 are 1 point each. Do you think that is good? That's as opposed to, let's say it's just 2 points for the primary and 1 point for the other 2? It's probably an obvious answer. Like it's probably 3 is reasonable.
I think shifting would probably be the one of the better areas for it. The other might actually be though. What is it called? Why am I blanking on this right now? You burn the
objectives.
We've
got Scorched Earth and Better Part of Valor.
Scorched Earth might actually be a better place for that. If you burn at the rather than take out the D3 in Scorched Earth bothers me. Like
yes, I can see that.
You hit a point where like I've outpositioned my opponent. I've made the smart trades, and they rolled the 3 twice, and I rolled the 1 twice. Like okay. I don't like that. But if it was like more of if the randomness, quote unquote, was mitigated, you get 1 if you burn it at the top, 3 if you burn it at the bottom, something like that. Because what that's doing is when you burn it at the bottom, you're saying, I'm gonna take the hit and burn it at the bottom. So you give your.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you could also, if you burn immediately.
Yeah.
2 turns, you get 2. If you hold for 3 turns, you get 3. Something like that.
Something like that. I take the die roll out of that one is my big criticism, but I think that would be a fun area to something like that. It's taken taken hold is the other one, right? Take the D3 roll out of it and play with this mechanic in those and see how it feels. I think that's a good place to see this first. If I go first, I get 1 point. If I go last, I get 3. Because then you're starting to really get people thinking about the nature of giving up the double for an advantage on the table, learning to mitigate the double. And I think that's the double's here to stay. It's one of those things, love it or hate it, I think it makes it Age of Sigmar. It's the punch, it's the hype moment, it's the puncher's chance. It's the run back in Street Fighter when they burn all their meter. It's the hype moment. And I think it's pretty cool. but doing stuff to play with it is what I want to see more of, and so I want to see this ported over onto different battle plans.
Yeah.
So
Cool, man. Yeah.
all
All right. So we are on. Oh,
yeah.
you already did day one, so we're back on most favorite. So my third.
You did relocation orb.
Did you do one?
My third would be gifts from the heavens.
For least or most?
For least favorite on that side of the table.
Gotcha.
And this is pure anecdotal, but it's similar to relocation orb, but I have never heard a battle report, whether I won or lost, that has not ended in, and then I rolled the die and it landed where I was and I won. Or, and then I rolled the die and it landed where they was and I lost. I have never heard a battle rep, ever, recapped it any other way. And so I hate gifts from the heavens, but it is the most aptly named battle plan because you win it with your gifts from the heavens. But it is on my least favorite side of the scale. So.
Yeah, and it's only 2 meteors as opposed to Star Strike with the 3.
Right. It's only yep. Yeah, it's just my God.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's a little underwhelming. And my main issue is the number of objectives. It's just too few.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we're back on the good side of things. What do we love?
Okay, so yeah, the second one. So second game at a 5-round event. Let's see what I have here. So I had 2 lists I was looking at. This is one that I would put as the second game or the 4th game, personally. Places of Arcane Power.
Okay. Wow. Oh, okay. All right.
Kind of an obvious one. I see Places of Arcane a fair amount as a 2-day choice. Seen it a fair, like Nashcon, for example, last year. It was the top of day 2, so your 4th game. And that was when I lost against Sean Clark because I played like an idiot and Sean didn't. And yeah, so the Place of Arcane. I mean, a lot of to say about it. It has the hero requirement. You need, I think, a hero focus scenario in a 5-round event, 5-round tournament. I love the diagonal deployment as opposed to 3 Places of Power, which is the traditional, middle deployment, usual orientation. So it stretches things out a little bit better, I think, particularly with the 2 on the sides. They're pretty close to the edges, so that's nice. Yeah, it's a great scenario. It can be a little trickier to win it, even if you've got a hero-heavy list. If, for example, you're high drop and you get out-dropped and your opponent goes first and bunkers on those objectives, creates layers, creates screens, can make it difficult for you to actually get onto the objectives with your heroes in time enough because you've got to potentially chew through the screens. So yeah, I think there's a number of elements going on with this that makes it really interesting.
I like this one in the aggregate. I like this one in the aggregate. I kind of, I can't put it on my favorites list or on my best list.
Okay, cool.
And that is because, and as I kept running back all my games of it, and how much strategy did I employ? My strategy every single time was put Nagash in the middle and win, and I have every time. And so it doesn't feel like I've ever played this scenario, quote unquote, correctly. So I don't have a good. It does feel like it favors the 1-drop. But paradoxically, it tends to feel like it favors the 1-drop go first, where usually it's I want to beat you and then say, no, you have it. This one is one of those, I'm just going to jump onto the objectives first and then say, go. Yeah,
there certainly can be some challenges with this from a matchup standpoint, similar to Duality of Death in my mind, like we talked about earlier. Yeah, where if you go up against Fire Slayers or OBR and they outdrop you and they get on those objectives, start scoring, and you may not be able to kill them fast enough before you're just outpointed in the game, and the game's over by round 3. And so you could potentially run into some of those matchup situations.
But this comes back to the aggregate, and I think this is something I would love for the community to embrace a little bit more. I think Haywo said the fun's in the aggregate on
Yeah.
one of his recent videos, and
Yeah,
I've
totally.
started to like completely plagiarize him and say it myself.
Yeah.
Like, if you think of a whole tournament experience, it's okay to drop one L. You know, obviously, like gunning for top tables and trying to win it all, fine, man. Like, be competitive as you want. But like when it
Yeah.
gets right down to it, like I don't think one matchup against Fire Slayers ruins your weekend. You know, like you still saw all your friends, you still had, you know, whatever. If it's over quick, then get a beer. Then you get to drink an extra beer that round. Like, I think that so I still like Places of Arcane Power in that aggregate, even though there's some wonkiness to some matchups I've found. And again, like my strategy is just put Nagash in the middle and like put a spell portal on that one over there, and then have the rest of my army go fight that one over there. Like, so even though my experience on it is the exact same every time, like it's never different, and my strategy never changes.
With how you run Nagash, do you have the bodyguard component where he can put wounds off of a unit?
In Petrifex, you don't need it.
Okay.
He doesn't need a bodyguard in Petrifex. You say, here's 1,000 points. Either you're going to run from it or you're going to fight it. And if you fight it, I'm going to teleport him.
Again, even with, I mean, so just thinking about this specific scenario of playing against Nagash, that's one objective. He hangs out on one objective.
Right.
Like, actually, in the game against Sean, this came up, where Sean had put I think it was, Royal Terrorgeist, Ghoul King on Royal Terrorgeist, on a far objective. It didn't go in the middle, so I just ignored it the entire game and focused on the middle and the far right, my far right.
Right.
And he had to keep him on there because of, he had a limited number of heroes. He needed to continue to score, so that one was pretty much out of commission the entire. It was scoring, but it was kind of out of commission in actually being a threat that game.
Right, and that's why I put Nagash in the middle with a spell portal, because then he's like reaching out and touching me.
Sure, still doing some work.
Yeah, he can put that spell portal and keep the threat of Hand to Dust. But back to what you're saying. No, like it's just one objective, and I think that's another good like teaching point for the category of battle plans for the episode of Battle Plans is it's only one objective, and if you get that, okay, you know what, I want that objective, fine, play the rest of the table. It makes your decision making easier, right?
Yep.
I actually, so we were talking about take and hold. I hate take and hold. Supposed to teach you. I teach people on Places of Arcane Power.
Yeah.
It's the one that's the one I teach people on. It's 3 objectives. It teaches you that heroes are important, maybe artificially so, depending on what army you're on. But it gives you in the classic mentality of chaff screen, protect my hero, or bubble wrap, movement, needing to move. Okay, someone's scoring, doing math because the math adds up, right? So like it gets you used to that. Like the math won't always be linear. Sometimes you it's kind of exponential or whatever. And then having to risk assess and go, I need to take this before turn 3 or I can't win.
Absolutely.
So I like Place of Arcane Power. It's one of my favorites, but I kind of kept it off the list because I felt like like my bias was showing through too much.
Right on. Yeah. Well, we can get into that at the end because I definitely still hold to that assumption, which could be mistaken, that a 5-round tournament needs to have at least one scenario that is hero focused, explicitly, solely hero focused.
To keep the list honest.
To help keep the list honest. Yeah. Again, there can be matchup issues that you can run into, but I think on the whole, that's relatively minimal. Yeah, among the set of matchups that you might see, and it also has cascading effects of still placing value on shooting, placing value on in general, just for list building, it can really impact what you got to consider.
This is where you get to have fun with someone like Korgus Cool or like Scarbrand, right? Like if you can get to those points early, the guys who are just melee powerhouses that no one fights in melee with their heroes, right? They just stand there like doing the rock, bring it on, like with the hand, just like gesturing people to throw models at them because that's all they want to do is fight. Like if you happen to get Gotrek on one of those points, right? That's what those guys want to do. So you even kind of like incentivize like that diminished role, which is the melee, the melee foot hero. They actually suddenly feel pretty cool because like now if you get them on that point, the opponent's like just like sweating and they don't want to assault it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it plays with, like, for people who are conservative players like myself, you have to be careful about not being too conservative. I'm always concerned about threat ranges
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to minimize the impact that might be coming my way if the opponent, because everybody always gets the choice of going first against Stormcast.
Right.
So I'm usually in the mindset of, okay, I've got to minimize them actually choosing to go first because I've left a lot of juicy targets.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so anyway, it gets into that case of, I want to potentially give something enticing that I'm willing to throw away to try to encourage my opponent to take first. But yeah, you can get into trouble, as I have before, if you play too conservatively in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So plays of arcane power, which brings me to my third. Where did you say you'd seed that in your 2-day
I
tournament
would
structure?
do round 2 or round 4.
Round 2 or round 4. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm actually gonna go. This is the one that I think will surprise everyone. Star Strike. I actually like Star Strike.
Okay, so
Um,
we've got the new version is
the new
the
version
less random. Okay.
specifically,
Okay.
2019 Star Strike, and I've already
Okay.
made Greg upset because he hates the new Star Strike. He loved the old one better. I
Yeah.
like the new one because it gives the illusion of, hey, it's totally wacky and random. So I feel like
Yeah.
it appeases that want, that desire for like the randomness, but it it mitigates it really nicely with that first meteor always coming down somewhere in the middle. Usually it's going to
Yeah.
be at the very least the center line of the table, and then it's probably going to be at the middle of of deployment, right? Like that's probably where it's
Right.
going to drop. And then those next two are going to come down, and they're going to they make you have to like react and decide. You can
Mm-hmm.
play a little predictive and go, on average it's going to drop in that 5 to 9 zone. I'm going to be ready to catch it. But like you can
Mm-hmm.
also be like, oh, if I've got this keep back unit, the place I don't want it to drop is over here. I'm going to get ready over
Yeah.
there. Like you could I like that it kind of rewards foresight a lot of times more than it punishes it.
Yeah.
I feel like it encourages you to play a KG game. And that's
Mm-hmm.
it's still like got a pretty straightforward deployment. The scoring's straightforward. Like it's got an approachability that random ones don't often have. I like this as a, believe it or not, round 1.
Okay.
When all the grudge matches are happening,
Yeah.
like this is exactly where I like that.
Yeah.
And I
No,
have,
that's cool.
because I have inflated the grudge match like worth in a tournament. This makes it onto my list because as a round 1, day 1, when everyone's grudging each other, I feel like you
Yeah.
might as well just add a little bit of randomness. People are already, if you're a new tournament player, I
Mm.
feel like your nerves get a little bit more at ease when they're random. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing I could have done. It takes the burden off of having to be critical with yourself so that you can just start playing the game and having fun in round 2.
Right. Right.
So
And
that,
so the prior version is a little too random for
yeah,
you, or
yeah,
any other thoughts on that?
it's too random.
Okay.
2019 again, that first one, kind of knowing that it's going to drop in the middle turn 1 for the most part, like kind of knowing it's going to be right in that sort of mid third of the table, going okay, and then being able to
Yeah.
build strategies from there. What sucks is when you roll boxcars and it's like all the way in the corner and you've deployed in
Yeah.
the middle and now you're like an alpha bunker army. You're just like suddenly like running to get over to it like that. But even then, there's a joy in that, because you've still got 2 more to be wary of. They don't drop too late in the game. They don't become
Yeah.
further random. Once they're down,
Yeah.
they're there. And then you just play the game.
Yeah, to me, that is within that acceptable space of randomness.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, on average, they're going to come in the 5 to 9, but it could happen, and that's a choice for you to consider in your army building, in your deployment, in your decision making. And yeah, if it happens and you're not ready for it, you could really be screwed. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this one as well, particularly the newer version.
Yeah, I like the new version. I was not a fan of the old version, and I searched my soul to find one random quote unquote battle plan that I liked. This is the one that I actually like even more than what is it? Shifting objectives. Shifting objectives is fine for the same reasons we already outlined, but I like Star Trek a little bit more because when I think of it in a tournament context, I go, this is the one I want to play day 1 when I'm grudging my buddy, or someone I've never played before.
And I love the scoring on this one. It's some of my favorite scoring orientation, where the number of victory points are equal to the battle round per meteor. So if you hold all three at battle round 5, you'll score 15 points. And that is a way, on average, can incentivize, promote longer games. I think anything that promotes long games, where things are really, and you got to think longer than average in your decision making, incentivizing, maybe be a little more conservative early, play for round 4 and 5. I love all those elements.
Yeah, the KG play is really what I enjoy. So
Yeah.
that puts us on the worst side. So this should be pick number 4.
Okay.
What's the 4th worst in all of Age of Sigmar?
Let's see. All right. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the 4th worst. I haven't been tracking as much on the worst side, but okay. Let's get into a little bit on To the Heart.
Yeah.
You want to do that now, or we can wait?
I think we'll wait on Knife to the Heart because we both got it on our list. We started with one we have on both our lists. Let's end on one we have both.
Okay, so we'll wait on that. So Duality of Death.
Okay.
Duality, when the new GH came out in 2019, I don't know if it was a majority take on Duality of Death that it was great and very relevant for being among the scenarios you would choose for a tournament. I generally got that impression that a lot of folks thought this is a solid scenario to play at an event. And that's tapered off more as the months have ticked over. Mm-hmm. I think there's still views out there that it's a very good scenario. I'd love for you to maybe argue on it. I don't see it. I didn't see it when it came out. I still don't see it at all. Yeah, like, again, to me, this is almost the height of the alpha bunker issue that can lead to non-player experiences. If you go up, and there are a number of armies that are very strong, have been strong in the meta for some time, that can get on those objectives, and you can't shift them. But then again, I tend to be playing a very high drop army that never gets the choice to go first, so that could be part of my bias.
Could be. See, unfortunately, Duality of Death is on my list as my 4th most hated one, so I can't convince you otherwise. But I can add to why it's the worst, which is the kill box deployments. They're terrible. They pointlessly punish like certain armies and not others. So
in what ways?
Death Stars, for instance. Any Death Star army or some concentrated force where you're forced to now move your stuff out. Basically you're forced to split your forces into suboptimal deployments.
Gotcha.
I feel like Khorne. Congratulations. I forced you to 2 separate kill boxes. Enjoy this. Now you have to choose. It's fine to have to choose. Am I going to have a strong side, weak side? But I feel like it ends up so tight on some of these armies that you're forced to have 2 suboptimal sides. You don't get a strong side or a weak side. You just get 2 mushy sides.
One thing I'm hearing in that is that's not necessarily universal. That there are a number of armies that could still go strong on 2 fronts. And there are some armies, mini army builds that you can break.
It's usually strong side, weak side, I think, is what ends up happening for the average army. Some armies, like Fireslayers, I have 2 strong sides, come at me.
Sure.
Petrifex Elite is going to say that. Daughters of Cain is going to have 1 strong side, but it's going to just run up the table, take the objective, turn left, and just turn left at the corner and just run across and murder you on the other side of the table. But there's the Khorne really pops into my mind as that army that's just kind of punished. Gitz is another army that I feel is punished by this deployment. So this is a deployment that I feel is suboptimal. But then it's below our floor. It's 2 objectives. It's 2 objectives that exacerbate the issues of being good drops. Having good drops at a good hero, having a teleport, all these things that not everybody has. That if you have them, you're just I'm the best ever. I just get to win this.
Yeah, totally.
I don't.
Yeah.
Plus, I feel like it encourages that, like you said earlier. But I'd love to underline a second time here is the alpha bunker thing. This is kind of Knife to the Heart when I look at this for certain armies. I go, okay, cool. I'm gonna play for the minor. You're never going to kill my stuff. I'm going to put my hero right here in the middle and just wave after wave of pointless battle idiots between you and the objective, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. I don't like that. This is... I get what they were trying to do, adding battle line to it. I don't think made it better, and it's just...
Any thoughts on what might be ways to improve this? Or does it need almost a wholesale rewrite? I mean, of course, the prior duality was just hero, but it still had the two objectives,
I mean,
and it was generally not a favorite.
So what if this becomes like, what if we add randomness to it? Like, what if it's shifting objectives now? Like, what if the objective can bounce to either side? Improving the deployment, probably. I don't know why there's a no man's land in the middle. You know, that 24-inch space at the middle, you can't deploy your army. Just take that out. There's no reason for that to be there. Forcing me into 2 kill boxes so that the person who goes first can just AoE the crap out my army in one corner and it's gone, and now I play the game with half my army for the rest of it. Like, it just exacerbates these certain issues. Zinj is gonna lick its Zinj KO. Armies like that are gonna like lick their chops when they see me deployed in that kill box a certain way. They're just gonna. Easing up on the kill box deployment, I think would be decent. I mean, it's 2 now instead of 1, so that was an improvement. But honestly, just fill in the gray there with a deployment. Let me deploy across the whole line. That way, I can at least feint on which objective I'm going for. You know, your decisions are telegraphed for the most part as well. I have a strong side and a weak side. You're gonna deploy against. I put Nagash down here. You're gonna deploy everything in that corner over there. Like, it's obvious what I'm gonna try to do, right? Like, or you're gonna deploy everything to try to kill Nagash on that side, and then I'm gonna go, haha, got you. Everything goes in this side for me. So it's a little cagey, but when it gets right down to it, I feel like it's too telegraphed of a deployment. The first thing I would do is just alleviate the kill box, entirely. Hell, you could force me to do a backline deployment, shrink it to 6 inches, and just have it the whole backline of my table instead.
Yeah.
You know,
that's interesting.
If you really want to keep that like tight, like sort of claustrophobic deployment for me, then shrink me back, but let me be able to get my pieces next to each other. So maybe make it a diagonal deployment, just something to alleviate the 2 kill boxes. I don't think they're good.
What about? I don't know. I was going to say 3 places of power with the battle line or hero qualification maintained, but just adding another objective.
I mean, that's really what you do is you add a 3rd objective to this. I mean, that's really what you do is you put an objective in the middle as well. Or I mean, that's probably the as is. You just put an objective in the middle, give a 3rd objective. That's probably the simplest fix. You don't have to do a ton of stuff with it. Just one change.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think it would still have some challenges. It would by adding a 3rd. Yeah, that would definitely be a leg up.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So that was your go or your favorite. Or
so now we're back to the good side because I agreed with you on Duality of Death.
Awesome.
So I'll just go ahead and continue talking. I'm going to say Better Part of Valor.
Okay.
I really enjoy Better Part of Valor. I'll go ahead and pull it up real quick.
Yep. Which one? 18 or 19?
I was thinking 19.
19. Let's see. That one cleaned up the issue that they had originally with Better Part of Valor on round 1, and now you can only burn starting round 2.
Right.
So that helps a lot.
So this is the tolerable zone of risk reward for me, whereas I hate Scorched Earth a little. Like, I don't hate Scorched Earth, I just don't like the D3, the 1D3. I just don't like it. I feel this cleans it up by having you make a calculated decision on which turn am I going to burn it on. Now, this violates my own rule of approachability. I don't think this one's very approachable for new players.
No.
No. But that's where I move this into day 2. So like around, I think round 4 is already round 4 is already kind of the make or break moment for a lot of people. This is going to be this is the risk reward battle plan sort of on a day 2. You're going, how long am I going to keep back units here? 6 objectives is like just about the right amount to stretch the Death Star armies really thin and like have them make a real hard decision early. And it just, you know, like my Beast of Chaos army just like laughs at this battle plan, whereas my Petrifex Elite just kind of goes, oh, okay, you know, I'm just like sweating.
Yeah, right.
like I'm just sweating at deployment for this one. But it is long wise. You're deploying, sort of you're turning the table sideways when you deploy on this one, so it's a little weird. But it's just that, like I said, it's that at that top of the tolerance zone for me of burning objectives. They're not random. It's calculated. I go how many turns, then I burn it. This is one of those ones that I feel like it kind of separates the gamers, like you just, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, provided it doesn't just say you're not allowed to play the game. You're allowed to play the game here, and it's just going to separate that day two sort of pack a little bit more.
Right. So what are your thoughts on the main risk that I see with this one, is of course, potential to burn all of the objectives. You're not limited on the objectives that you can burn as long as you're controlling them. So you can get into situations where you could have a list that's designed to go aggressive early and really get on your opponent's objectives, and you've also got enough to hold down the fort on 2, if not all 3 of your own. So then, because you got the turn order, maybe you gave up first, and you then go bottom of 1, and then you get top of 2. You got that early double, and then by that point, you have been able to take your opponent off of 2 of their 3, let's say, and you've been able to hold on all 3 of yours, and then boom, you burn all 5 at that point. So you can, I think you can.
Old Slanesh was capable of this, but which army is doing these gymnastics right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So
like that's so much board control. Like you're basically threatening. You're relying on getting the right double, and then hitting.
I think potentially Deepkin.
Deepkin, okay.
Potentially, it is reliant on, again, you can get in those matchups where let's say you're playing Deepkin and you don't have an army that is as capable of getting on 2 of your opponent's objectives early, rapidly getting on them, so to threaten them early, whereas the Deepkin player, of course, is able to immediately start threatening you. And so there could be some asymmetry there in terms of mobility that impacts the potential burning early scenarios here.
Is this one of the ones that you can tag and run away and then burn later?
I believe you can.
Because that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest problem with this one is you can tag run, so you don't even need to.
That's a good point.
You don't necessarily. Yeah. So like I deploy against your weak side in the top left corner of the map. I run across the table, kill you, and then I turn right and I start running down the side of the table. Right.
That's a great point, man. I never thought about that. Yeah, you're right. That would help.
That's the glaring issue. I think you need to force people to stay on the objectives. The other one would be if we play with that top of the round, bottom of the round thing. And I like it at a tournament, but I still think there's room for improvement in a GHB 2020. Those are some of the changes I would love to see considered.
Yeah, maybe a flesh eater court.
Thanks for the assist, Razor Tree. Shout out to chat game.
Yeah, maybe Effect could still be pretty good at playing for that turn order. They can still do a low drop. War clans are quite fast. You've got Tzeentch that could potentially do that. I don't know. Tzeentch might struggle. I think Tzeentch might struggle with 6 objectives, depending on the build that it is. Sometimes I think the Tzeentch hype is a little overblown.
I kind of agree. I think that this does favor summons and teleports, but which battle plan doesn't? Speed kills. But I do think that I like this battle plan if I can, despite its flaws, for one simple reason. This battle plan is a puzzle, and I like that it is a puzzle to currently be solving. I know my deployment. I've got 3 objectives. I'm going to put my stuff down, and I'm going to try to attack strong side, weak side. I know how I'm going to deploy my army based on what my army is when I play this one. Whether it's my Beast of Chaos, my LON, my OBR, or anything in between. But so as the game evolves against my opponent, a puzzle presents itself, and I really enjoy that aspect. That's really what I like about this one. And that's it's got some problems, but that's it. You had a question in there though?
Yeah, no, I do think this is, for my money, the highest return on generalship, on good decision making.
Yeah.
of any of the scenarios. Yeah, what I was going to ask is if you make, what change would you make to the D3 on Scorched Earth, and if you make that change, would you favor that over Better Part of Valor?
That's a great question. I like playing with the turn order for burning objectives. I really do, because you already kind of were messing around with the problem where like this army that can, go for that 1/2 double, right? That those armies that are really playing for the double. So they're playing for a coin flip and like leaning into a coin flip, and that's sort of the strategy they're banking on. Anything to mitigate that in the burn your objectives category, I think is a good change. If you change the scoring in Scorched Earth to be top of, bottom of, I think I like Scorched Earth way better than Better Part of Valor. Provided Better Part of Valor maintains its current scoring, I think I suddenly like Scorched Earth more.
So Scorched Earth, you cannot burn your own objectives, but you can burn your opponent. And if you go top of 1 and you decide to burn one of your opponents, you're going to get 1. But if you go bottom of 1, if you go second and you decide to burn one of your opponents, you get 2 points.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I feel like what you're doing there is you're opening yourself up to get alpha'd and saying, I can kind of take this, or I've got a plan, right? And then you're gonna try to go and then get across the table and burn, and your opponent's aware of that, and I think it becomes this little poker game of like two generals like kind of staring down each other, wondering who's gonna go for the throat first, and then once you do, chaos is gonna unwind because like now, and I think that, and furthermore, as the game continues, now you're going to be looking at that 3-4 double, right? Or maybe the 4-5 if you end up like equalizing and pushing. Like, I think that really becomes an interesting. I mean, we're violating my approachability rule, but like honestly, approachability, the guy's going to see 3 or 4 objectives that can be burned for like the average casual, and they're just run, burn them. Like they're already having fun. There's eight objectives on the table. They get to burn half of them. They get to run across and burn them. Like That being said, I really do enjoy the fact that like you're incentivized to play offense or defense on Better Part of Valor. I really do like that you're like holding my stuff and then flipping it at the end is good. Is a good strategy. Yeah. So no, I've talked myself out of wanting the other Scorched Earth and coming back to Better Part of Valor. I still like this better. I still like Better Part of Valor more.
And then do you see much of a gap between what you just described with the change to Scorched Earth versus having the 2 points just be across the board? So that is, regardless of whether you go first or second, starting from the second battle round, if you burn
it's 2 points.
One of your opponents, it's 2 points. That's
fine. I think that would be fine too. I mean, either or. I think that's fine. I like the idea of playing with turn order, but that's kind of like my pet project right now. If it's just consistent, you get 2 when you burn the point, and I think that makes Scorched Earth better as well. It's 2 points. Like, that makes it better, period. 8 objectives, sure. Honestly, yeah. 8 objectives is uncomfortable for most armies. Yeah. It's uncomfortable for most armies, so you have to make trades and decisions. But don't punish me for making the right decision and then rolling a 1. That's such a feels bad.
I haven't thought enough about it. That's certainly not on my list of most favorite or least favorite. The 8 object portrait, the latest. It's one I haven't thought a whole lot about, to what degree that is outside the boundaries of what's acceptable for the variety of army types, faction types. That is, like OBR Fire Slayers. Is that pushing it too much against them? Are you pushing too far against that type of army?
I don't mind taking the auto loss or having to play KG. Like I don't. Like I'm not like a loss isn't the worst thing in Age of Sigmar. I lost like kind of barely against Calebron, Daughters of Cain of all things on Scorched Earth as the filthy Petrifex elite player, and I didn't feel bad. Like I didn't feel like I wasn't playing the game, and that's the big, like I had to be aware of defense, wait for my opponent to try to like make their move and then counter, because if I run across the table, then he just like teleports onto my back, and burns them all, and I'm lost. So I had to like position correctly, get into a position to win, to even begin like moving on the table. But like it was, again, uncomfortable is good. Like, uncomfortable is fine. That means I have a puzzle to solve and I'm playing the game and I'm thinking. I don't mind being uncomfortable with the battle plan. You know, in terms of like objectives and being spread out on the table. Like I don't mind that personally, even though I tend to play pretty concentrated armies. You know, even my LON army had 2 power centers, you know, and I had 100 models on the table, and I'm still only covering 2 spots, you know. Like I don't mind that, but I do think Scorched Earth gets more palatable. Right now, it's kind of in the middle. It's not the best. It's not the worst. I don't mind seeing it in packs. I enjoy playing it. I'll play it with my friends any day of the week at home. But I'd love to see it B2 instead of 3 at the instead of a D3 at the very least. Better Part of Valor, the one change I'd love to see is the tag and burn. I don't think you should be able to tag and run.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
I love that you can play. I'm not as adamant against bunker armies as you and Vince are. I think it's fine that if you want to play a defensive style army, you know, fine, whatever. But like you shouldn't be able to be the defensive army and then at the like later on in the game like, oh, he's abandoned his objective in the top right corner. You just run your defense off the point. No, you have to stay there. You have to stay there if you're playing defense. And that's my only caveat.
Again, in our defense, 2 qualifications. It's not necessarily speaking of myself. It's not necessarily I know. It's not necessarily just the defense. It's both defense and offense in one pack. Right. And it's scenarios that create a greater likelihood of defense dominating. More of those matchups. Right. Those rock paper scissors matchups that are pretty non-interactive.
Right, and I think with Better Part of Valor, since it's 3 objectives I have to cover now, if I'm playing defensive and you come to me and then my offensive unit just murders you anyway, you're just going to go, you know what, I'm not going to go to that point he's defending over there. I'm going to go to the one with the 20 Mortec Guard instead of the 40, right? Like, you're going to make those decisions. So that's not such a bad thing when you have something like Better Part of Valor, where it's a nightmare is like Duality of Death. You have no choice. I've got a Bone Shaper sitting behind 60 skeletons. Like, you're not winning this in any scenario. You don't have the kill power. And even if you snipe off my hero, like, I've got buffer zones of bodies where you're just not getting to that point anyway. And now I just have to send 140 block at your dudes or catapult off your dude on the other side of the table and, like, GG easy. And I just, like, dust my hands. Like, played so hard. Like, not even, like, rolling dice. I'm just, like sitting back, leaning in a freaking recliner while I, like, play that game.
100%.
So that was my 4th was Better Part of Valor.
Cool.
Did you get a 4th in for your?
Let's see. I think I'm up. All right. What do we got here? Well, I'm gonna cheat, and it's actually appropriate. Cheat a little bit here. It's actually similar. I was close to choosing Better Part of Valor, but because of the generalship sort of bar of entry, pushed me a little against doing it. Although I love your now that I'm a little of your perspective. Like you said, it can make for a great 4th round. I'd like to get a better sense of what is the scale of challenge or issue with this potential of armies going aggressive, being able to get on top of someone, and then them not being able to do enough to threaten their opponent's objectives, and then they burn early, and that's a wrap. I haven't thought enough or got enough experience to know how much of an issue that really is. But anyway, I was going to get at is you tipped it off early in this conversation. I love Scorched Earth, but it has a fundamental flaw, and that's the D3. At least in terms if you don't like that randomness. So I was going to cheat and say Scorched Earth, but just fix it with that particular issue. And I think it's a fantastic scenario.
So we just 4A4 beat each other this time. So I get like and we already had the discussion of. I mean, a lot of why I like Better Part of Valor, I like Scorched Earth too. I 8 feels. I hate to put the ceiling at 8. Our floor is clearly 3 objectives. I think we were in agreement there. I hate to put the ceiling at 8 because I'm like, well, what would 9 look like? Like I have that curiosity in my mind, or I'd be interested to see what you do with 9. Maybe you put a center point on something like Scorched Earth and like have at it. Whatever. Center point can't be burned. Anyone can control the center point, and it's always worth it's always worth 2 points or something. Like,
that can be,
you can, so like, I'm not willing to say, like, the ceiling is 8 objectives, but 8 objectives is getting uncomfortable for every army I play, except for Beast of Chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's some armies that love to, but they can still do a fair amount of bodies and good mobility. BOC with that.
Yeah, BOC doesn't care. They scoff at your 8 objectives. They say add 2 more.
100%.
So like Scorched Earth, like I'm almost a buyer on. The D3 just keeps it off my list. Just and that at the end of the day, that's what it is. But
and again, like in my mind, that would be another opportunity for a very concise, well-designed little pack that you try to build some buy-in with other TOs, or just a good number of people in the community who have experience playing tournaments, and they can come together and say, we think these are good ideas, and one thing that we think is a good idea would be this modification to consider playing with Scorched Earth. If you want to reduce the random, you don't have to do it, but if you want to reduce the randomness a little bit, we think this would be a good idea.
Yeah, for our little like TO aid pack or whatever it is. Help out. Yeah, that'd be a good caveat. Better part of Valor putting in there, like, don't let people tag and run. Like, they have to stay on the objective, because that helps mitigate the offense. Best unit is the offense and defense. Like that mitigates that too. You have to pick one. You have to stay or you have to run. Like, you can't do both.
Yeah, well, especially when you're scoring, if your opponent goes first, top of 1. And you've got models on all 3 of your objectives, well, congratulations, you just took control, top of 1, and now you can move away in your movement phase, bottom of 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other. Actually, that just kind of kisses on another subject I'd like to see explored in Battleplans. I know this isn't necessarily the right place for it, but playing rather than scoring at the bottom of the round, the bottom of the turn. I mean, a battle plan that does something like that might be interesting. So you
say that again.
Scoring at the bottom of your turn as opposed to the bottom of the round.
Scoring at the bottom
of... Or shifting when you score in the phase. Like, shifting it out of phase. So you score in the movement phase or hero phase. Like, shifting that scoring out of phase, I think, would be interesting design space to explore.
I could see that. That could be cool.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and definitely on the battle round. I think Chain Colossus has that with Line Sorcery, which actually I think is kind of an interesting match play scenario. You scored at the end of the battle round.
Right. I think that'd be kind of cool. So, like, it kind of softens that, like, you're instead of the turn, you're at the bottom of the round, and so now you have to, like, kind of both turns are measured in your decision making on the table.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's pretty cool. But so then
back to you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump ahead to best, my last best one, my number 1 best, and then we'll jump over to worst real quick, because this is a bit of a 1-2 punch. I think so. The 5th best one I think is Knife to the Heart.
Okay.
And the 5th worst one I think is Knife to the Heart.
Yep.
So, I said it's the best, and so I'm going to say why I think it's the best first.
It sounds like a perfect summation of the communal expression on Knife to the Heart. Mm-hmm. It's like it's and both.
I like Knife to the Heart exactly round 3. For a similar reason why I want to see better part of Valor at 4. The round 3 is one of the most stressful rounds in the tournament. Like 3 and 4 tend to be pretty stressful. For me anyway. I think if you put Knife to the Heart at 3, what happens is, like, so if you're on 2 wins going in there, or you're on, 1 win, 1 loss, and you go into 3 is kind of becomes a make or break. How serious am I taking day 2 moment?
Sure.
Like, when you put Knife to the Heart at 3, a minor victory, if you're playing to quote unquote win it all, a minor victory probably isn't going to cut it on day 1.
It's going to cut it, right.
So you have to play to win. You can't just play for the minor. You have to play to win that. Day 3 becomes I'm playing for the major or bust. And I think with that alleviates some tournament pressure in the in that scenario, in that sort of situation. My army is I can alpha bunker this no problem. Like, I'll play for the minor, whatever. Throw your
Yeah.
ceaseless waves against my awesome dudes, and I will crush them endlessly.
Right.
But when you have to win it, you have to stick your neck out. It becomes a fun
Yeah.
objective, or it becomes a
Yeah.
fun scenario for me.
Right.
The flip side of that is when you don't have to win it, it's just a slap fight of a matchup.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's a pretty good case for it. Okay. And then any other?
I'm sorry.
The least favorite?
The least favorite, then it's the other thresholds of, it's 2 objectives, so I have to fight you. I think it knife to heart is one of those, it's IDKs to lose. Like it just it's so weighted for like particular armies. Sometimes it feels like Fire Slaves would be another one where you're just like, laughing Fire Slayer type moment, right? Like like, what are you going to do? Good luck.
Yeah.
Petrifex Elite, it's easy to minor that one. It's a little bit harder to win it. People can you don't fly. You don't have any deployment tricks, so people can often speed bump you long enough to like where you're just going to get the minor.
Right.
So like it's just it's just such a weird, hard to win like the major kind of, but it also on the other hand, it really incentivizes you to really go for the win. If it's in the correct context of the tournament, which is, like I say, right at round 3 where you go, how hard am I trying tomorrow? And I think that puts it as that really redeems some of those other qualities, because it does have some cool. It does have like that. I like that it's over win. I like that, like, because that means your fast games are really fast on, at the end of the tournament. You've been playing 2 rounds already. You've been there all day, and you go, if I go really hard, I can win this now.
Right.
Or
Unbelievable.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I do like your idea. I never heard of it being round 3. I usually hear it as a round 1 or round 5. I like that idea of round 3. You're getting longer in the day. You might be tired, grumpier. It could be an opportunity, like you said, to make up your mind. What am I planning to try and do around day 2?
Yeah.
Am I playing for 5-0 or just so? You can. Yeah, I think that's really interesting for round 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it at round 3. When it's round 3, I just go, all right, like this is I have a decision to make round 3. When I see it in a pack right at round 3. When I see it anywhere else, I'm just like, all right, minor win incoming, like, or whatever. Like, it makes me uncomfortable, but I have to submit to that point. Razor Tree says in chat.
Yeah. So okay, here's my pushback. All right. So your first point was that my interpretation of your first point was that this is a good one, round 3, because it's difficult to win, and as you said, you have to make the decision: am I going to play for minor, or am I going to go for glory here?
Right.
And I do like that as well. I think that's really cool principle. But I think there's a scenario that you can do that with on average. Similarly, that makes for more more often better play experiences than Knife to the Heart will. And that scenario is Blood and Glory. And that's my most favorite scenario.
So this is the 4.1, right?
The 4.1,
yeah,
that has traditional deployment, 4 points in the center of each of the 4 quadrants, and traditional border war type deployment, 12 inches up, 24 inches between us. Starting from, I believe, the 3rd battle round, I'll check that. One player immediately wins a major victory, if they have all. But if neither player has gotten all at any time from the 3rd battle round on, it then goes down to whoever has the most will get a minor, and if you have an even number, you get a draw. It's pretty difficult, in my experience, at least personally, playing Blood and Glory a ton over the past 4+ years, to get all 4 of those objectives. Now, you can get into situations where, again, you try to use the turn order for your advantage. So one thing I would do as a Sylvaneth player would be, I'm a 1-drop previously. So Sylvaneth would almost always, I'd say that. You would often, you might in that case I would sometimes give up the first turn to play for that double, or generally try to optimize getting the double going into round 3. And so yeah, you can potentially set it up to have a couple of turns to get all 4 of those. But even with that, personally, I find it to be pretty difficult often.
My pushback on Blood and Glory
Mm-hmm.
is it's got 2 minor conditions, and the vast majority I don't feel it's got that gear like Knife to the Heart does, where you're like, I'm gonna make the big decision to try to win it. Blood and Glory feels like it's got the I've got a decision to try to win it, but then it's just like, okay, it didn't work out minor. Like, it just, that's so many of my reads and oftentimes my experiences with Blood and Glory is it doesn't, like, it's got that gamey quality you're talking about. You're thinking about the turn order and stuff. But so often it's like, the coverage for all 4 objectives to completely control tons of armies just don't have that real estate, you know?
Yeah, it's really difficult.
It's really, really difficult. And so it ends up maybe Blood and Glory, if it's 3 objectives, I think now we're kind of talking. But even then, I feel like you can't put the 3 objectives in the appropriate spots because you want them to be back. So, like, I don't know how you would set up that deployment to have you put one in the middle there. But Blood and Glory, the main thing is, like, this one, Blood and Glory reads even more the minor victory one than, it's the double minor victory one over Knife to the Heart.
So my interpretation of what you're saying there is that you think, on average, again, if someone isn't just playing casually and doesn't really but if they're actually going for 5-0, you think that more players with that mindset are incentivized to play for the minor as opposed to Knife to the Heart, where we would be more likely to see them go after the major?
I mean, if you're in 5-0 mode, you're going for the major in both scenarios, like, right?
Right.
I mean, you're going for the major every time if you're there to win it all. I think this is more approaching those, like, that sort of, like, that, like, I'm going for best in faction. I'm not going for 5-0. I know I can't beat the best player in the whole tournament here if I play them tomorrow. But I could probably like I might have a run at best death, best order, best etc. etc. Am I gonna try that hard, you know, for it?
Right.
I don't want to, like, you know, be rewarding people who aren't there to win it all. But this game is so robust in how many people go to a tournament, for how many different reasons. I have those moments where I walk up to the tournament. I can win this. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm like, but do I want to? Do I want to have one more beer? Like, and then, like, having the objectives kind of help fill in my narrative for the week, or having the battle plans fill in my narrative for the weekend is as important in a pack to me as what army I choose to go for the weekend. Am I going to bring just, you know, 5 Stonehorns instead of a real army with all the bodies, or, you know, what am I going to do this weekend? I feel like Blood and Glory just tends to be, even if you are, you know, like, one of the best players going to win it all, I still think that propensity for ending up with the minor on Blood and Glory is higher than it is for Knife to the Heart. So I just feel like it's kind of got, like, 2 sort of no-win scenario, 2 half, like, no-win scenarios versus, like, the 1 half no-win scenario of, like, Knife to the Heart.
Okay,
I mean,
that's
I can outplay you on the table and capture 3 objectives and we go to a minor anyway. Like, that feels crummy to me. That feels crummy. I think that's, at the end of it, it's the feels bad of, like, I outplayed you, I got 3 objectives, and it was just a minor. I could have sat on 2 objectives and got the minor as well. Like, that. Like,
that's probably more to think about the times that I've played this scenario a lot, and it does tend to come down to a minor, with someone having 3 and one person having 1. It can be really difficult to get that 4th one, especially if you don't have in general, very difficult to get it. So I might be coming around on your perspective on this. What I have liked about it is it's more interesting. I find it a lot more interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
personally, with the 4 objectives and so on, other than Knife to the Heart, it's pretty damn straightforward. And I mean, I do like I take the point of, you have a decision to make. Am I going to go after it or am I not?
Yeah.
But if you have someone who's not going to go after it, they can lead to fairly boring, uneventful games. Whereas with 4 objectives, I guess it seems you're more incentivized to at least think that you have an opportunity to go after it, to get it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't particularly disagree. I just feel like in the end result, it often feels like I I actually went for it, and like it's still a minor, and both of them do that. But like this one has that feels bad of like, but I have more objectives. You know, at least in Knife to the Heart, it's like okay, we both have the same amount of objectives. Like, you know, that feels a little bit more equal, and then it comes down to well, how much did I murder, and that's kind of the associated whether you get a minor or whether you win the minor or not. It comes down to kill points kind of anyway. Right, like that's
kind of that is interesting. And again, that notable decision. I mean, that was my last game against Fire Slayers at Nashcon. Yeah, it came down to kill points because he came after me, going for the major. I withstood him, and then I had to make a calculus. Do I have enough left to get his in time? I didn't. So okay, I'm just going to try to optimize kill points here. That often happens in that scenario. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. Yeah, I mean, the kill point stuff and like that becomes the next decision making point when you're on the minor. On the other hand, that's not a bad thing that Blood and Glory has that extra decision to make. Well, okay, I'm not going to beat on kill points. Might as well go for that third objective. You know, like that is a good additional sort of puzzle piece in it. And I think what we're getting at with like Blood and Glory and Knife to the Heart is I think they're polarizing, and I think that they're just 1 degree off from being good battle plans. Is that like I think we're just 1 degree off from being truly good battle plans. But
that's probably fair.
I cheat by putting Knife to the Heart at 3, and you know, like that's how I because I also put it on my worst list. You know, because if it's anywhere other than 3, I'm just like this is garbage.
I'm not a fan. I've seen some TOs who have chosen Knife to the Heart as the 5th and final battle round, scenario for the final battle round. And not a big fan of that. I mean, I get the thought behind making it the 5th, but which is probably kind of obvious. You know, the whole thing that we've been talking about here, it's difficult to get. You got to really decide, but it can lead to situations that are a little anticlimactic. You know, even if you're playing for winning the tournament, but you're also got the potential to get Bet's death, let's say, and you face something where you're like, well, maybe I'll push a little bit and try to get it, but like I'm probably going to know early if I'm going to be able to get this or not. So it can be pretty anticlimactic for a 5th and final game.
I mean, you think you think about like the structure of a narrative, right? You're supposed to have like it's that little gradually building mountain, right? And then it's supposed to have falling action. With Knife to the Heart positioned at 3, you're still climbing that mountain, and you might plateau, but day 2 can then be another big peak, right? If you put it on round 5, day 2, this is it can just flatline moment, right? And that's where I think that it kind of highlights the problem with it. So I'm not disagreeing with you, agreeing with you, but elaborating.
Absolutely.
Cool,
man. Well, those were my last ones. The asterisk, that's the one I felt the least confident in of my choices of 5. I think another one special mention would be Escalation. Escalation is interesting. That's one that I don't have enough experience with to have a strong opinion, even though it's an old one. I actually haven't played it all that much. I like some of the potential with it, where it's got those different deployment restrictions based upon whether you're a behemoth, you're a battle line, or you're not a battle line. Behemoths, I think, are 24 off the line, and battle line are 9 off the line, and then everything else is like 18 off the line, off the middle, and it's the diagonal, like Places of Arcane Power, and it's got the 3 objectives.
Escalation I have as a honorable mention on my worst. Because I feel like not all behemoths are created equal. Putting a Stonehorn 24 off the line that basically has a kind of a close to an 18-inch kind of threat range to begin with before you begin moving. Like it's like, oh, ruined its day, or my Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, like, ooh, ruined its day. Or like, but now I have this behemoth buff piece, right? Where you're just like, nope, you got to be back. Like it just
or teleporters.
The values feel a little arbitrary when in the greater context of the game, and I
can definitely see that point.
That's my only kind of beef with it. Like, some armies where you're like, okay, we teleport anyway. Who gives a crap? Like, it falls onto the bad side of the my column here that I have everything arranged into because of that approachability threshold. This is one you're going to read and reread at the table and still get wrong until you've played it enough times. And if you're a new player in a tournament, you're going to drop your battle line and then realize your necromancer needs to be back another 6 inches, and you're gonna, or like whatever. You're like, no, like it's just, can you let me takesy backsies my deployment? And no, screw you. Like I'd rather not deal with it in a tournament context, especially when ultimately the values feel arbitrary because they just
I agree with that. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I played Beasts of Chaos that had 2 Gorgons, so not exactly the most competitive Beasts of Chaos list. Yeah. But it punished, those Gorgons had very little impact on the game because they don't have the movement of a Stonehorn or whatever.
Yeah, they don't have run and charge, like unlike the rest of our entire army. Just like
right. So yeah, that's a good point on escalation.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. So go through your 5. So 1 through 5 that you do for a 2-day event.
So my 1 through 5, it was in no particular order here. It was focal point.
Give me your order. What would be your day 1, round 1, 2, 3,
right.
Day 2 round? Yeah.
So round 1, I would start with First Strike or Star Strike. Because of the that grudge factor. I really like it to ease the nerves and get into it. It's got just enough randomness to where it could get wacky and fun. From there, probably Border Wars, because now we've come to something a little bit more normal, a little more straightforward. You're gonna play just a game of Age of Sigmar now. The nerves have settled. You're playing a game of Age of Sigmar, and then from there, I'd close it out with Knife to the Heart. Round 3. It's got to be round 3, otherwise it's garbage. Day 2, I would go with then Better Part of Valor, and then finally Focal Points.
Nice.
So
that's a really good list. Yeah, I like that a lot, especially with Asterisk on Knife to the Heart, specifically for round 3. Yeah. And yeah, man. What would be a potential alternative that you think could go in that round 3 slots?
Probably Battle for the Pass.
Okay.
I might have to if I put Battle for the Pass in, I think I move that to day 2, and then I move Better Part of Valor to round 3. I think. Better Part of Valor. Yeah, I could even end on Focal Points. I think even on a day 3, because that's Focal Points for me is always a really hypey match. Yeah. It always is. It's always delivers. I love to end a tournament on it because it's pretty hyped up. But 3 or 5 Focal Points goes in 3 or 5. Then if I take Knife to the Heart off, I put Focal Points in my 3 because I want that that hype moment to end the tournament and day 3 on, because you're gonna have a good time with Better Part of Valor and Battle for the Pass on day 2. Then you're gonna have these 2 back to back.
Right. So yeah, I like Better Part of Valor there. So it was Star Strike, Border War, potentially Better Part of Valor as a replacement for Knife to the Heart. What was your 4th one in this situation?
If we replace it, then we go to
Battle for the Pass.
Battle for the Pass, and then Focal Points.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's of course Border War and Battle for the Pass are, they share the basic same structure, but with a pretty significant distinction of the deployment difference. With presumably you would be talking about using the long deployment for Battle for the Pass.
Yeah, I think Battle for the Pass goes 4 then. It's got a little element of exactly. Basically, Battle for the Pass. If Knife to the Heart goes out, then Battle for the Pass has to come in, because that's got that sort of hyped, condensed, go running at each other. You just got some extra battle objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some folks are not a big fan of the triangle deployment. I love it. It looks visually awesome, and it changes things up on average. I mean, depending on your build. But yeah, I think it has a sort of a nice rhythm to it, at least in my opinion.
But
So cool, man.
but yeah, I mean, I actually like having both Better Part of Valor and Knife to the Heart in the same tournament because I think that you're going to get a bigger spread of tiebreakers that way.
Gotcha.
I think that those are the moments that you separate the 4-1s from the 5-0s type thing, where you're or the 3-2s from the 4-1s. You really, the generalship that I think you're going to see for Better Part of Valor is, I think, super significant on day 2 for separating out that pack. As you're heading into the top tables in round 5.
Gotcha. So nice.
I that's why cool. I really like Better Part of the Valor right in round 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that I was just looking here at Scorched Earth, Better Part of Valor, where I had them. Yeah, I think I had it 3 or 4 in my list for Scorched Earth, or Better Part of Valor. Cool. Yeah, mine were. I mean, that's sort of. So number 1 would be Total Conquest or Battle for the Past, or maybe a Border War, but kind of similar to what you were talking about. Well, actually, a little bit different, more of what you were talking about for your round 2. But I like your idea of Star Strike round 1. That's really interesting. But yeah, my thought was, that round 1, give some representation of classic AOS, and as your starting point. Round 2, Places of Arcane Power, I had in that could go. I think that's a really good round 4 as well. And then Scorched Earth with the change. I definitely think you need to change that D3. You could maybe potentially slot in Better Part of Valor there. Blood and Glory for my 4th. There's definitely some overlap in our patterns here, but we just have, in some cases, some different choices. Like I chose Blood and Glory, you chose Knife of the Heart, but some similar principles behind those choices.
Yeah.
And we both love,
focal points. Yeah, like end strong.
Yeah.
End strong.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be either you're ending on the tables you feel you should be playing to win it all, or when you're best in faction, or you're going to end up running into one of your awesome mid-table friends, in focal points. You're like, oh man, I underachieved, I took bad beats day 1, but then you end up running into your buddy in round 5 and you end on a great game. Like focal points is just like, I love ending a week in that. And again, you think about telling it, the battles kind of being their own structure of a narrative telling you a story.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, my number 1 special mention is Star Strike. For many of the reasons that you said. Yeah, it's a really cool scenario, especially the newer version, because it has that potential for randomness, but more reliability on average. And yeah, I think it's pretty interesting as a random element type choice. Okay. Cool, dude. I think that was fun. I definitely found that really useful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've added some more to the dialogue of Battleplans for anyone who's considering this. So this would be a good episode for TOs and prospective TOs, or even players, kind of like getting a feel for the structure of a tournament and how going through the weekend just kind of by proxy of listening to all this.
100%.
But I guess we could close it there. Or do you want to do the bonus for the viewers? Maybe save that for another time.
Yeah, let's do a few minutes.
Real quick. Few minutes. All right, few minutes. All right. So this is no longer RantCast. This is now Tyler Emerson's show.
My show.
Yeah, this is your show now.
All right. So as appropriate, you said you didn't get a chance to listen to any of the Scruby and Wells episodes because some dumbass took them offline. I don't know who might have done that.
I don't know why you would do that.
I'm not sure what happened there. I need to get them back online here. To be honest, I can't even recall why I did that, why that happened. Honestly,
it was either Scruby or Wells, though. Like, who knows which?
It was one of the two.
One of them, yeah.
Yeah, one of them was pissed off, and I don't know. Anyway, I do need to get the episodes actually back online because a lot of people have been very kind in saying they'd love to listen to some of them.
Right.
Anyway, yes. What I was going to get at is you would have noticed that pretty much every episode would start with Y. So we'll do the obvious. I haven't heard everything that you've said about OBR. You've said a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't really have sort of a good core understanding, sort of concise core elevator pitch type, like here's the essence of why you love OBR, why you're so passionate about it. Regardless of, I'm especially interested in, whatever you find most intriguing, but covering, play style, aesthetics. But yeah, what are the core elements of why you love OBR?
So my first read was really that, like, the pseudo Pan Asian thing. Like, that's the
Okay.
first moment where you go, this is awesome. I mean, if you've seen my
Yeah.
Black Knights, they're converted into samurai skeletons on
Oh
horseback
yeah. Oh
already.
man, those look amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so like those are already converted, and then like GW goes out and releases an army where they're like, "Hey Andrew, hey Mephisto,
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
heard we heard you like samurai skeletons. Well, have we got an army for you?" Like it was like
Right.
Games Workshop was kind of in my head,
Yeah.
um, and then like Catacross was like sort of that Mortark
Mm.
video where he's like, we haven't met Catacross yet. He's just been like pontificating for like 3
Right.
videos, and then you
Right.
get this like the bad guy, like it's just he comes in dramatic fashion. He starts out early on in true bad guy form where he says like, I don't like murdering people, like it's just my
Mm.
job, and then he gets all the way to the end of the video, but I think I kind of do like murdering people. Like it's just
Yeah.
like it was such a like it felt like Games Workshop was in my head, and
Mm.
I mean I've always been the death player.
Yeah.
I was the Diablo 2 Necromancer.
Yes.
Castlevania was my jam.
Oh yeah. Did you like? Have you watched season 3?
Not yet. No spoilers, please.
Okay.
I've heard some stuff already on accident. But
Mm.
freaking Warren Ellis, man, and the showrunner are fantastic there.
Yeah.
I mean, Warren Ellis wrote G.I. Joe. He did a miniseries leading up to the movie coming out. And
Oh wow.
he's like, and so he's like, I've never watched G.I. Joe, I've never read G.I. Joe, and you want me to work on it? And they go, yes, we want you to work on it, Warren Ellis. And he's like, can I blow up Hong Kong on episode 1? They're like, no, you cannot. And he's like, what about Moscow? And they're like, you may blow up Moscow. It's just like, and like he brings that same like humor to this like deep, awesome. I'm sorry. Anyway, like I love Castlevania. Symphony of
Yeah.
the Night is still top 5 favorite game of all time. Playing
Yeah.
Alucard specifically because he's the
Yeah.
he's the best.
Yeah.
And then that wanting to like that sort of like semi emo kid. Like I just played the Death Armies. I played Black and Blue decks in Magic.
Mm.
So just like part of me. And I've recently been reflecting on like why did I gravitate towards the Death Armies? In like 6th
Mm.
grade. Why did I
Yeah.
go that way?
Right on. Yeah.
And I realized like if folks who have listened to RantCast know that I'm a pretty famous insomniac. At the core of my insomnia is like one basically PTSD, but on the other hand, it's also this like fear of nothingness.
Mm.
I don't like the idea. I like death is terrifying to me. Like I'm
Okay.
actually afraid of death.
Yeah.
A lot.
Mm.
And when you sleep, I feel like you're getting a free trial of death. Like and then you're like, oh, I'll play, like
Oh man, I've never heard. Maybe my all-time favorite description of sleeping: a free trial of death.
yeah,
I
it's
want
like,
that on a t-shirt.
yeah. So like I feel like like I've always had this like sort of fear of death, but like young, I think imperceptibly, I gravitated towards like death because it was like making a mockery of it or turning the thing that I'm the most afraid of into a strength, and like sort
Huh.
of embracing it as like this alter ego, this persona, and
Yeah.
and so like at that core, this like I'm playing necromancers and Nagash, the god, the progenitor of necromancy in the world that was, right, like he invented necromancy and he discovered immortality, like he did that. And so I'm
Yeah.
playing his army that is giving the middle finger to death the whole time.
Nice.
Vampires,
Yeah.
that's what they're doing, right? Like they're giving
Yeah.
the middle finger to death. Like, and when that all came full circle with Ossiarch
Mm.
Bonereapers, where like you have Catacross with this mocking video, and then that little bit of like, hey Andrew, we hear you love samurai, and
Yeah.
specifically samurai skeleton, and I'm like, you know what, I do like that. Now if only I can get like
Yeah.
ninja vampires, like
Mhm.
like it'll be the best of all things.
Yeah.
So that's the why. And
Okay.
then from there it just like it felt even more and more like it was like I love cavalry, and they're like, oh, you already love your Black Knights. What if they had
Yeah.
Rend? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes.
Totally.
What if they had Rend? Like
Yeah.
every time it was like they were just one upping every expectation I had.
So what are you enjoying about the playstyle?
I like that they're still very much the like attrition, like gamey sort of army where you're a ceaseless undead legion marching forward like in Army of Darkness. It's just that Danny Elfman tune comes in and just the flute, and you're still just like marching across the table, which is how Death should always play that way. You should always just be marching your legions across the table, but they took that and they kind of remixed it a little bit. From a like practicality standpoint, I'm running fewer models now than with my 100 Bone Daddies or my 100 like Bone Zone list before. I'm running 60 now. All in, I think I'm at like 62 models because of Nagash. Like it was 65. I've got that.
What's your latest list?
It's 40 40 more tech guard, 20 more tech guard, Bone Shaper, Nagash, 5 Cavalos, Death Riders. So that's my latest list.
No battalions?
No. So your 5 drop. My previous list was more tech guard. It was 20, 20, 20.
Okay.
And 5 Death Riders still, because you got that need for speed. And
you still had Nagash?
Yeah, and I still had Nagash.
Yep.
But I found that 20s die even in Petrifex Elite, and that is simply unacceptable. And so my thought was, like, if I have 3 20s, I can go wider and contest more stuff. And it's like, you know what? They didn't help me before, like, because people just, like, 20s die. There's a lot of stuff where you're just like, that can do, like, 10 mortal wounds, and now you're down to 10 5s, and they can finish you off with, like, a good charge from a quality unit. Like, even though Petrifex Elite are these unkillable monsters. So, essentially what ends up happening is a battle starts here with my 20, it goes away, and then I have, like, my other power set. Like, so, I've switched to 40-20. The 20 has the Bone Shaper directly behind it, so they're artificially a little bit higher. And then Nagash is projecting his regen table wide.
Right.
And
nice.
the closest...
You have the spell portal?
Yes. In the current list, I have the spell... It's a decision between either the spell portal or the pendulum.
Gotcha.
And you have the Shrieker. The pendulum, because the people who have beaten me have not fought Nagash. And that is unacceptable that I do not get to teleport. So I'm going to take the pendulum and throw it into myself and teleport.
Oh, man.
I
never... That's cool.
Yeah, it is unacceptable that I do not get to teleport Nagash. So...
I've seen Siege players do that, but I hadn't heard or seen.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's probably a thing that a lot of them do. I just hadn't heard of it. That's great.
Yeah, the choice is either spell portal. I think is not the way to go with Nagash in Petrifex Elite anymore.
Okay.
Before, like in 2.0 Nagash with 60 Grimghast Reapers, he was still very die-y. A 3-up rerolling 1s isn't the best save. A 2-up rerolling 1s is much better. Nagash no longer needs protection at that level. Like you say here's 1,000 points of wizard, who fights about like 400 points, and he's gonna kick your ass. And you actually push him around the table. He has to avoid a couple power pieces, like that can actually take him off the table. But like you just choose to not be by them, and feed them more tech guard instead, and then Nagash goes around and does what he does. He feels like a death god on the table. Like it's so good. Nice. Like the feel of Nagash, it's finally right. It's the best it's been since LON 1. Since AOS 1.0 when he was YOLO solo Nagash with the old Mystic Shield. But like adding in the fact that he can Gatling gun arcane bolts is just the cherry on top.
Oh yeah, that's great.
So he's just this like walking around like Bono in the South Park episode, just going yeah, like pointing around, shooting laser beams, and like meleeing people down with his sword. And I call it his katana because he's converted. But he feels great, and so because he's constantly in the fight now, you don't really need spell portal. He's gonna walk up to the thing that you would spell portal hand to dust before, where it becomes useful as a projection power, because Nagash can be over here and I can hand to dust your guy over there. But then I need something like say 5 cavalry to show up on and finish what he started with that hand to dust. So I do take Umbral spell portal right now. I don't think it's the way. I take it because I'm just attached to it. I have too much fun. with Umbral
Nice.
Spell Portal. And
Yeah.
the cure for my insomnia, as it turns out, has been knowing that on day 2 of a tournament, I have Places of Arcane Power with Nagash Umbral Spell Portal in Ulgu.
Yeah.
I'll sleep like a baby every time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I feel like I buried the lead a little bit there. As far as playing it, it's just
Yeah.
it's condensed the things I already love about Death.
Mm.
It's given them sculpts like Army of Darkness Undead, still awesome by the way. I still love my LON, like my 100 skeletons.
Yeah.
I like but like GW kind of did the impossible by giving skeletons personality that you don't have to like infer or meme on. When you
Right.
look at Mortek Guard, they're like sneers. This mockery of Sigmar's, Stormcast Eternals with their sort of like dime a dozen faceplates that are just normal. And every
Yeah.
one of the Mortek Guard has a different like grimace or sneer or smile.
Right.
Like they have all this personality, this arrogance about them that is just 100% death.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I love how they look in person. We have a guy that started playing them recently. And yeah, they are amazing. They're one of those that, yeah, I mean, that's probably true with most models, but they definitely look even better in person.
it's true.
But,
It's
yeah.
true. Like where they hid the seams on them is kind of stunning too. So they look like this perfectly sculpted army, like they're supposed to say in the lore, where like their bone masons have discovered. Mortisians have discovered an entirely new magic to shape bone as hard as steel.
Right.
And then you're like, oh yeah, these dudes are totally sculpted, because they're like the mold line. I have to pick them up, flip them upside down, and turn them like 30 degrees.
Yeah.
So that's cool. The Mortek or the Cavalos Death Riders are awesome. They have all these hidden like little hidden details.
Yeah.
When you're like looking at them, like some of them have like little faces on their hindquarters, like where like it's like a skull, and they're really cool. I love the like winged hussar head, like the sort of winged hussar headgear, and then like the overall like samurai vibe to them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So they're just.
Do you think we're gonna see more of the elite units? What are the name of the stalkers or
In
the
terms of like
guard?
on the field or on the table?
On the fields? Yeah.
I think that's an inevitability. I think right now a lot of Ossiarch Bonereapers are leaning on a pair of crutches. The first crutch being Petrifex Elite.
Yeah.
The second crutch being Mortek Guard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little paradoxical in that like I feel like you want to actually take a 40 or two. But beyond that, I don't think you want all these like 20s of Mortek Guard. I don't actually think you want to run 100 Mortek Guard. Like some people have advised. I think you can get away with a pair of 40s and then like bringing in a unit of some 30s or whatever. Like I think you push up past the 20s towards 30s or 40s. It's just once you're at 30, you might as well go to 40. It's 50 points, man.
Yeah.
What else are you going to spend 50 points on?
Right.
It's like I think you can feel secure with just one big murder stick of Mortek Guard, and then you can take some of the speed that you need. And Stalkers present speed.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the interesting space I often end up in is catapults versus harvesters.
Okay.
It's weird because I feel like catapults sure up your matchups against the stuff that beats you. But paradoxically,
like what?
For instance, like Skaven can be a problem for you. Like they're a massive problem for you. In fact,
Cities of Sigmar.
Cities of Sigmar are a problem for you. Tailored lists. Fire Slayers do what you do, but better. You can actually take their heroes off with a catapult, though. You can just say, "Hey, you're gonna roll those. You're gonna roll those ones. You're gonna roll those ones." Like, and when you do, 5 wounds. Goodbye. Like, so. Like I think that they help you. Doc can. Doc doesn't beat you straight up. They beat you on the table, but they do it better. Like just about as good as anyone possibly could on the table. And they're not powder when you fight them because all their save isn't coming from armor. It's coming from redundant after save. So all that like bonus rend you're enjoying isn't really as impactful.
How does the traditional? Well, I guess the traditional Doc thing, if you're trying to beat OBR, is you're adding 20 Blood Sisters.
Yeah.
And you might be doing, like, for example, we saw a fellow whose name I'm forgetting at Las Vegas Open who did really well. He was in the final 8. He had both the 20 Blood Sisters and added like 6 of the Scourge Runner Chariots in order to give him capacity to shoot heroes, I think. Well, and just generally do range damage.
Yeah.
Added speed, added mobility. I mean, there's a lot that you can get for 6 Scourge Runner Chariots in a dock list. A lot of utility, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Daughters of Cain, it's like that puzzle was solved such a long time ago. People quit working the problem, even as the meta shifted. And I still think DOK's got some like more interesting builds than your 60 sisters and what's kind of become the cookie cutter. Like you're probably okay with just like the 30 witches, and the power center, and then from there exploring the rest of the builds. Kinnerai, by the way, are a fucking nightmare for Ossiarch Bonereapers.
What's that?
You don't have keep back units in the army. You don't really have something that stays back and holds your objective for the most part.
Oh, keep back. Yeah.
The closest thing to that is how I use my Death Riders, because they can get back, so I can have 5 Death Riders sit on something and then turn 3 actually go out and do something once everything's kind of showed up.
Yeah.
If I've got 2 objectives to worry about, then whatever. But so often it's 4 objectives or 5 objectives, and then that's where Kinnerai become a problem, because they're always going to show up where I can't cover. The army struggle. I mean, Kinnerai can drop down and just say your catapult sucks. Within 6 inches, it can't attack.
Can't attack, right.
So you're just like, nope, sucks now. This sucks forever. We've also seen like Shadow Warriors coming in place of Kinnerai, and they do the same job but with more bodies, and they actually have a decent melee profile.
Yep, absolutely.
So like 10 Shadow Warriors or 5 Kinnerai are like this, just a thorn in your side as an OBR player.
Right. So what are give me two main tournament builds, just at a high level. So would you say Nagash is one of those?
No.
But okay, what would be the two main builds?
I think your main build is going to be Catacross in Petrifex Elite with it. I think it works out to be about 60 Mortec Guard. I still think you take the 5 murder ponies. Or
40, 10, 10, 20, 20, 20.
I think you go the 40, 20, 40, 20, and then you take Death Riders in that final slot.
Okay.
What I actually really like Brendan's list right now.
I was gonna say, yeah, I'm still doing the 2x5 cavalry.
He does the 2x5 cavalry and he takes a Death Lance, and I really like taking a Cavalos Death Lance.
Yeah.
Or a Cavalos Lance. His list is really close to, I think, like optimal. He has foregone harvesters and catapults though, and I think that's where there's another gear for his army.
Yeah, he was talking about that the other day. The problem with catapults is he can't roll. You need a 3 up.
Yeah, he can't roll worth a shit. So, what I think Catacross is the way for the most competitive builds right now. Just simply, RDP is the gas for everything in your army. What people often overlook for our army is like, yes, we get an abundance of quote-unquote command points. Everything takes them. Your smashing and bashing is situational. Teleporting onto the table. I know Stormcast Eternal are considered jobbers right now. But teleporting onto the table doesn't take you anything. You just do it. Like a lot of Allegiance abilities, summoning. You get a resource and then you just use it. Like that's separate from command points. Like there's a lot of abilities that armies have that do their shtick, and it doesn't require anything other than like Khorne. Tons of just positional buffs. They get positional buffs and prayers, and everything is hinged to your RDP. We have spellcasters, but they're garbage. Like no bonuses to cast. Our spells are powerful, which is why you see a lot of people taking Archon. But I think he's I think he's a trap
because
he does something that the rest of the army doesn't do, which is he dies. and,
Is he a base 3 now, or is he a base 4 that goes to 3 and Petrifex?
He gets he's 3
Rip
spells.
save. Oh, I meant sorry.
His save. He goes down to a 3 up, I believe.
Yeah, he's probably a 4 up. He's got to be a 4 up, going down to a 3 up.
And the thing that kills it though is his number of wounds.
11 still.
Yeah, but he's a 3 up save with the 3 spells. For what, 360? I mean,
okay.
Like you might as well take like a pair of Bone Shapers, get their free regen, flip coins for their spells, and they're casting on 5 ups and 6 ups anyway. Where Archon is good is that he's fighty, and people forget he's fighty. So you can actually like, he's got a 16-inch base movement. You can actually throw him around the table, and as long as you pick the right battles, like he'll fight stuff. But the stuff that beats Archon even harder, and then like that's the problem. Like I'm not worried about casting better spells to beat like someone's suboptimal cities list. Like I don't care. You know, like I don't need that to beat you.
So the general hard counter, to the degree that there's a hard counter against OBR, is it essentially ranged?
It's ranged. It's the same thing that counters basically any high armor army. It's mortal wounds and rend 2.
Yeah.
Mortal wounds and rend 2. If you've got mortal wounds and rend 2, you can beat Bonereapers, but it helps if that rend 2 is ranged or the mortal wounds are ranged. And so those are it really does help, because 10 Mortek Guard will still kill you if you're trying to melee them straight up. So you need to cut off our regen if we've got it with a Harvester or a Bone Shaper. Target priority number 1's our Bone Shaper. It's carrying a steroid and regen.
Right.
If you can kill it instantly, just as fast as possible. Get rid of it. Important to note is if you're in Petrifex Elite, chances are that thing's going to be wearing the bone armor. It says it negates 1 wound a turn, or 1 wound per phase, not 1 mortal wound. So mortal wounds are just as good against it.
Okay.
I've seen people play this rule wrong. So be aware they're not negating that first mortal wound. Everybody, kill it. Kill it with fire.
Right.
This way, like body count beats us. Sticking us in tar pits beats us. We don't really have this is where I think, as people get over their fear of Bonereapers, and you're playing our game if you push across the table to fight me. Like you've just given me a free charge by charging me. Like I wanted to fight you anyway. Thank you.
Right.
You beat me by not playing that straight up game. You beat me by covering objectives, attacking flanks, taking off my buff pieces. That's
speed bumps.
Speed bump me. Like, I can't fly. You just speed bump me. Like like 10 Ungor Raiders is just as dead as anything else, and the Ungor Raiders cost me a turn and you 80 points. And plus my 400 point unit is just sitting right there now.
It's probably, basic principle is probably like, to the degree that you need to go in and do damage, equal to not saying anything amazing. You need to concentrate power and take it off. You need to focus down whatever you're going after.
You have to go in. You can't play the like equal points trade game with OBR. Only a handful of units can even attempt that. But you gotta hedge your bets. Like the notion of like 100 points versus 100 points, or 400 points versus 400 points. That goes a little bit out of the toolbox for you, because my 400 points is better than your 400 points, because my whole army is built to do this one thing, which is live and kill you. That's all my army does.
Right.
So like you need to commit hard. That's how you kill Nagash too. If I'm running my Nagash build, commit hard. Throw 1,500 points at Nagash.
Or do your best to ignore him.
Or ignore him. One or the other.
Have an Ether Void pendulum.
Yeah, to teleport after you when you're trying to run away from me like a coward. Archeon. My Nagash will run away from Archeon. I don't want any part of him. Gotrek, my Nagash will run away from Gotrek. I don't want any part of him. Like, he's cheaper than Nagash. Nope. Like, 2 Stonehorns. My Nagash will run away from 2 Stonehorns. 1 Stonehorn, actually. I parsed the math with Haywo. 20% chance of killing him full to dead. That is, wow. I don't want a 1 in 5 chance of my Nagash gone
Yeah, that's
Chances
wild.
chances are I'm gonna teleport off the impact hits.
Right.
Like a murder horn or a crunch horn, respectively. I believe the crunch horn is slightly better. When
Mm.
we mathed it out by like 2 wounds, but
Mm-hmm.
the crunch horns, the murder horns stat swing is healthier. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was like something like a 20% chance of taking him off the table. I'm just like, nope. Let alone if it's 2 stone horns, like fuck that.
Right.
Like I'm out. Um,
Yeah, totally.
so like yeah, I mean the army has got problems right now. I don't think people have like discovered them all, because what happens is you go Petrifex Elite is too good, and I go yeah probably, but like
Mm.
from there it's like okay now like let's put that in the corner. Petrifex is probably too good.
Real quickly, I've had conversations with folks about this, and I've been saying, at least my personal opinion on this is, again, it's the pick a lane.
Rend, yeah, stick to your lane. What
Stick-
I love what Brent from Rerolling One said,
Mm.
which is like it says in the lore that they're slow. They show up late and they totally do murder everything forever, but they're supposed to be slow. I'm like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
know. Here's like his fix and our fix. Kind of we landed on was they don't get the 3-inch movement
Mm.
that the rest of the legions get. Oh,
That's interesting.
keep your end, be as murdery, but now you're 3 inches removed from the game and that 3 inches piles up very quickly. It's the difference between being able to make a turn 2 charge or not. You know, it's a difference in
Yeah.
being able to scoop up that later objective. So yeah, I will murder you wherever I go, or I will
Yeah.
take the hit and murder you back. But like,
Yeah.
I can never get to where I have to really, as a death player, you have to get in motion early, always.
Yeah.
That's just
Right.
how you have to play death. Not being able
Right.
to fly, not being able to teleport. That's how you play this army. You have to get into motion early. Now,
Yeah, that'd be a considerable impact. That making that
yeah,
change.
and
Yeah.
so the OBR players are gonna be like, hell yeah, I still get to have Ren 2 dudes, and
Mm.
then like now that the heat is cooled, people see that there was a nerf. They go, okay, there was a nerf.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not as bad anymore. They're willing to test the problem, test the waters again.
Mm.
Points isn't the fix. You know, if you hit
Mm.
points, what is not a problem? Every other legion or bone clave of Ossiarch
Right.
Bonereapers, they're
Yeah, totally.
all perfectly fine. Hitting
Yeah.
points to punish Petrifex Elite is gonna hit every other unit in the everything else. Like the people who are just minding their own business, playing
Yeah.
crematoriums right now, and just like having a blast with their friends, literally because they blow up.
Yeah.
Like, don't hurt that person. They're not doing anything wrong. You know, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
even the person who wants to play Petrifex Elite because they're made out of dinosaur bones,
Mm.
and wants their Nagash to have a 2-up rerollable save, so he's actually worth freaking 1,000 points. Like, like they're not really doing anything wrong, but like the people who are really maximizing that list with it, like I can see the feels bad. I still think as is they struggle to go 5-0. You get to top tables, and every army that's good against you is every army that's on the top tables.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're
So cities of Sigmar, Zinch.
Toon
Is
Cities,
Zinch, is
yeah,
Zinch,
yeah, Toon Cities of
Zinch.
Sigmar, Zinch, KO, like KO,
KO,
KO's a
yeah.
problem.
They got a lot of -2 rends.
Yep.
You know, they potentially warp lightning vortex you. If they, what's the average drop with these competitive builds? Are you looking at usually like 5? Or
5 or so. For my army, I'm usually around 5 drops.
Okay.
I think Ossiarch Bonereapers expect 4 or 5 drops against them. There
Okay,
are
okay.
ways to get like decent 2-drop armies. The first list I ever built was the what was it? It was the Ballistari, which is the catapults list, plus plus a Cavalos lance. So I had the Thunder Lightning list
Yeah.
where I just had my cavalry charge across the table,
Nice.
and catapults just shoot you down.
Yeah.
I
You
think
mentioned Skaven. What about the like Flesh Eater Slanesh? Can they pose issues? I mean, low rend.
Slanesh is not a problem. I
Yeah.
think it's very clear that when I think that Ossiarch Bonereapers got a lot of they had a lot of Slanesh in mind when Ossiarch Bonereapers were made, in a way that I think that Slanesh was made in mind with a lot of LON in mind, because LON and DOK were the top armies at the time.
Yeah.
So when you're making
Yeah.
Slanesh, you're going to think about those good armies and what do you want to look like, right? I think Bonereapers were looking at Slanesh a lot, and Slanesh.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, yeah.
And like it's just like they're an Alpha Strike army, and Alpha Strike tends to lose to attrition. If attrition can weather the storm.
Right.
And that
Have
is
you had a chance to play IDK at all?
Yeah, I've played against IDK. I think you play a game of Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
I just think I think you play a game of Age of Sigmar. Same thing with tuned Maw Tribes. I think you play a game of Age of Sigmar. Same thing with War Clans, a tuned list of War Clans. I think you play a game of Age of Sigmar. Like
that's what I've been thinking as well. Like when I look at OB, I see a number of inherent constraints. They have obvious strengths, but they do have a reasonable number of constraints that make a number of, matchups that are going to push them. That you got to play well. You've got to, like there's a number of matchups that could be at least a challenge for you.
Yeah,
that's good.
I do feel like an inflated sense of like playing this army against somebody on their fluffy like ogre Maw Tribes list where they just got a bunch of they've got like some gut busters because they think they're cool, and like they got the 1 unit of Iron Guts, and they maybe have a Stonehorn. I'll probably destroy that guy. I will just probably crush you. Without even without even like thinking very hard about it. But like honestly, if you were playing that fluffy, straightforward list, I'd probably beat you with my Beast of Chaos too, and I'm supposed to have a 40% win rate with them. I think context is important. I think that lead gets buried a lot with this. Is like Petrifex Elite does fundamentally something that I agree with you and Vince on, is having the offense and the defense on the same thing feels wrong to me. It just feels wrong. But knowing that I concede that point early, I would continue to say, but like honestly, we still play a game of Age of Sigmar, and there's a lot of armies that push us and stretch us thin. There's a lot of counters to us in this meta, especially when you're talking that day 2. You're probably going to cruise into day 2 on 2-1 or 3-0, depending on where it falls. But then you're gonna struggle day 2. And if you're a competitive player or a competitive army, that's probably where you want to be. So in a strange way, I think that like Ossiarch Bonereapers are a success of competitive design. In that Slaanesh, when Slaanesh was at its height of power, or Flesh Eater Courts with all of its golden parachutes, what decision do I make to not lose my entire unit to a Terrorgeist? What decision do I make? Out-deploy it? Nope. It flies freaking across the entire table. 16 inches plus a spell to fly further than 16 inches, making a rerollable charge. Probably gonna kill my whole unit. Oh, wait, no. It whiffed on its attack rolls, or like it chose not to activate it first, or whatever happens.
The layers were a challenge as well, because when it charges, of course, it can wipe out that first screen, and then it can still, I believe, activate again and pile in, because it's the initial charge. So you go 3 inches with the second pile in, and then you've got a 3-inch reach on the Feng Maw.
On the thing that matters. Yeah, on the thing that matters.
So you got a 6-inch threat range. I was finding that difficult.
And it flies, so like even if you chaff it properly and like you measure out its pie plate and you like put just not enough space, it's like, I make the 10-inch charge, I'm gonna go over here on this flank. You can't like screen it enough. Double pile is in. Like, and then the other thing is like, say you outposition it perfectly and you get enough value in on it to kill it. It just activates twice and kills you in response, like because of the Gristlegore feature. So like Flesh Eater Courts was like the height of what meaningful decisions do you make to beat this army, and that was the problem for me was never really like activation wars. It was about the choices I had, and I feel like Slaanesh was that again. Like we had just like we were already angry at Flesh Eater Courts, and then Slaanesh comes in and kind of does the same thing, but like across the whole table instead of just isolated on one dragon, and so you're just like, I just dealt with one dragon, like now I have a whole army of 3 keepers and a bunch of other, and like a chariot, like, and now I go ahead, activate 5 units twice before I get to activate 1 unit in my army. Cool. Like, but like at least with Bonereapers, like I go, okay, I'm gonna activate my thing. Okay, I murder your unit because it's whatever. I get to destroy it forever. I'm awesome. And then now you swing, and then you do your thing. And hopefully you didn't charge my 400 points plus 200 points of buff unit, got my 600 point power center with your 300 points, and think that you were supposed to win. I'm
Right,
sorry.
right.
like I'm sorry you thought that was gonna go in your favor.
Yeah.
But then like again, like you're talking like number of drops. We don't have a one drop option really.
Mm-hmm.
They were very intelligent with the battalions. Like the one that you would think would be the one that you go into for a
Mm-hmm.
one drop. It doesn't have any wiggle room. It says you have this many units to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like so you're going, okay, I'm reducing my army by this many units, but then I still have to buy another battle line. I have to buy probably another hero to build like a proper army or a second battalion. So
Right.
you can get some two drops. You can get some pretty competitive two drops, but like you probably are around 3 or 4 because you want Catacross in there. He's in none of the battalions that matter. So.
Do you know offhand how many drops that uh, Death Rider plus Nagash build that did well at CanCon was? How many drops it was?
He was probably around 4. I
I
think
wonder
did he have a Death Lance or not?
Yeah, I think he did, but I'm not 100%
See,
sure.
I think he was just 4 drops because I think he just had the 3 units of murder ponies. I think he came in at like 5 drops because I think it was just
Oh, okay.
murder ponies, a Liege Cavalos, and then I don't even think he had the battalion.
Got
But
it. Okay.
if he had the
So
battalion, he'd have been 3 drops.
gotcha. So one of the, I mean, I think we probably covered this, but just in summation, I mean, what's the main 1 or 2 things that you think some folks are still getting wrong or are not realizing about OBR that makes them? I mean, look, their match win percentage, again,
Is
with the big asterisk of that, it's too, in my opinion, it's a little too high right now.
yeah,
It's not egregious. It's not Zinch, or sorry, Slanesh when Slanesh was 70%. At times, Doc has been
80.
way too high.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it was. And again, we understand that these percentages are not necessarily reflective of what really skilled players playing these armies a lot
Right.
can do with them. They probably have a much higher win percentage. That could be, making these percentages misleading.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, with all that said, yeah, well, like, what do you think are the 1 or 2 core things that people are missing about OBR that makes them a little more manageable than meets the eye?
I think it really does come down to table play.
Okay.
Like I really do think it comes down to table play. I mean, in the same when I was first getting into Age of Sigmar, the notion of alpha being the worst feeling you could ever possibly have. Well, it was Clown Car was the worst feeling you could ever possibly have in Change Host.
Yeah.
Oh, how the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, and
Vanguard, or what is
Vanguard,
Vanguard Wing,
Vanguard Wing.
right?
Yeah.
Like when I was getting into Age of Sigmar, those were like the problems.
Mm-hmm.
But like again, the fundamentals of those problems are meaningful choice. I have no, but Alpha was like the one that like people really latched onto. Of like, I have nothing I can do. They drop down and they charge me and I'm dead.
Right.
And they drop down and they shoot me and I'm dead. Like, like that was like that's every problem I ever heard. And I'm like, it's probably an oversimplification, but I think it highlighted a fundamental like disconnect in the community and how and like some basic fundamental of the game.
Yeah.
So in the case of like Alpha Strike, fast forward a little bit, Alpha Strike maintained. Okay, so KO gets nerfed, and Zinch gets changed. I wouldn't call Zinch nerfed. They just shifted the power in that army elsewhere, and you had a choice to build a completely different Zinch army or build a completely different army with the new stuff that was coming out. Zinch players tended to shelve their army and go and play something else. And then we got to see the endless spam spell start coming back out again before they got their new book, and you're like, oh, Zinch never got bad. It was just hiding. God, like that moment we had. But I digress on Zinch.
Yeah.
But the constant I heard was Alpha Strike is the worst. Alpha Strike is the worst. Gav and Eels. Gav and Eels. Gav and Eels. Over and over and over again. The thing that people hated the most. You don't hear a whole lot of hate about Eels anymore, right? And I think the big thing that like Eels and Gav were teaching you was better deployments and better use of chaff. You understand chaff that like I put the thing in front of the thing I don't want to die. Right?
Yeah.
Like that as a basic player in the game. But like a lot of our players
I don't as a Stormcast player, but I get the
No,
idea.
no, you don't get that luxury. I'm sorry.
I don't, because I don't play skanks. I actually have some morals. I'm like, the other Stormcast players in my community.
Like you don't get so you're on advanced strats right now. You're not playing with chaff. But
totally. Yeah.
Advanced strats.
It's all about the hard mode.
Right, playing Age of Sigmar on hard mode. No, like it's like you understand chaff, but like we have a community that talks a lot more about Age of Sigmar and reads a lot more about Age of Sigmar and builds more lists in Age of Sigmar. Putting it on the table and going, the chaff needs to be this far away was the disconnect, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
made Alpha Strike just this unsolvable puzzle problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was the growing pain moment in our scene. I think a lot of people have learned that lesson now. That's why, yeah, Gav got nerfed out of existence by way of all evocators and everything going up that just didn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
And Eels got like a slight tweaking. It's a difference of like, really, it didn't make a difference. It
Yeah.
didn't really like. It
No.
was like it was enough to get people to stop talking about it, but it wasn't really a major problem.
Yeah, for my opinion, for the hell that's worth, that was an unethical miss. But I mean, a lot of us have talked about that with the changes
Yeah,
or
yeah,
really lack of aggregate changes to IDK.
yeah.
Yeah, you didn't see much.
You didn't see much, but what I think would happen is people learned, and I
Yeah,
think that's the real difference. Is people learned the lesson. What lesson did they learn? Deployments of
right,
chaff. That's really what people
right.
had to learn. That's the hard lesson they had to learn. And I'm not saying like I am saying get good in a sense, but I'm not saying oh just get good noob. I'm saying that there is
Mm,
the knowledge of the community is growing. That we're
sure,
taking these concepts and we're applying them to the table more and more and more as problems
right,
present themselves. I think
right.
the problem that Ossiarch Bonereapers are presenting right now is objective play. Play the table. That's what I will tell you
Mm,
when at any time that you have an army that you can't beat.
mm-hmm,
What's the table say? But what does that mean?
mm-hmm,
Play the table. You know? Like, what am
mm-hmm.
I actually saying? I'm saying if there's a 40 block of Mortec guard here with a Harvester, and you've got 5 objectives, fuck off. Like,
Right, exactly.
go over there. And, like, that might
Yeah,
feel unfulfilling to players. And that's a criticism I understand. Like, it feels unfulfilling to play cagey.
yeah,
But a counterpoint real quick. Why should you ever feel bad about playing a tactical wargaming strategy game
yeah, totally.
tactically?
Right.
Like
Yeah, that's like one of the, I kind of gets into broader discussion of why personally I enjoy playing these sort of 3-2, maybe 2-3 sometimes armies that you're pushing for 4-1 is because they introduce more of those conditions on average.
yeah,
And I'm so like my player type is not the psychological profile that I want to go 5-0. That's out there. That's
yeah, you're
fantastic.
not a spike,
It's,
but yeah,
it's just not mine. But yeah, because it introduces more of these
opportunities
challenges,
to
these
play.
constraints,
Yeah,
yeah, opportunities to play where like I learn more. I don't, at least for myself, I learn more on average by the constraints in place and trying to wriggle my way out of them
mm-hmm.
than the alternative.
Right.
And with Stormcast, it's a lot about concentrating power and doing it thoughtfully. And when you go and do that, and a lot of those things, and you have to play for a longer game. You often get down in the objective, so you got to get back up, and you have to. You're not getting the choice of going first ever, pretty much, because you're usually a 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever drop.
Right.
So you have to take that into consideration with your deployment. Sometimes go more conservative, but so yeah, it just introduces the constraints, make it a lot more interesting,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think OBR is the lesson it's teaching you is to like
Mm,
start looking at looking at that macro micro balance that we don't
yeah,
always like. Players tend to be one or the other. You're either macro or you're micro. I think.
yeah,
And I'm very much a macro person. That's why I'm looking at the whole table. I'm not looking at individual reactions.
yeah.
And I think that's what you're kind of learning is like
Mm-hmm,
look at the whole table, look a turn ahead. I
mm-hmm,
know that if this OBR unit is here, it's on. I've got Battle for the Pass up here, so if you're on player A's territory, that objective there, I've got 24 inches between there and over here. I'm gonna
yeah,
put a speed bump 4 inches off this objective, and then
yeah.
I'm going to dare you to make a non-rerollable charge in 2 turns. Like,
Right, right.
yeah, good luck. Um,
Yeah,
so what I do think is
that would be a good topic, by the way. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but like, there are a number of those fundamental principles of good play that are often generalized.
mhm.
So, for example, with I love the objective 12-inch diameter
Yeah,
objective templates because that lowers the barrier to entry for
I
better
agree.
play around
Parity.
objectives. But yeah, and then
It
you've
builds
got
parity.
where you need to, if you want to set layers, where you want to potentially set the screen out in front, and then you have the scoring unit in the back that presents the optimal space
Mm-hmm.
for making a long charge that your
Mm-hmm.
opponent has to get. or maybe that unit's even further back so that it can just move on later on. Anyway, yeah, it's like it'd be interesting to try to figure out what are some of those sort of generalized good play principles that are a little more advanced than just what is pretty obvious to at least most people that have some sense of the game.
Right.
You know?
Right. Another one of my favorite is like when you have enough bodies to make a perfect 6-inch circle around something. You know,
Yes.
like, and just
Yeah.
you're kissing on the outside of it with your bases. And so if someone's going to drop down like their one thing to steal the objective later in the game, you're like, you can't. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Like I've done that accidentally a few times where it's still like, oh my God, I forgot that basic concept of, don't allow a teleport to come in and grab the 6 inches within an objective. Yeah.
You're just like, you can't, psych. And like, fighting's got nothing to do with it. Like, you can't physically move to within
Another one
range.
is get yourself potentially in some situations outside of charge range, because again, you don't have to be on the objective. So you might be might have a Terrorgeist bearing down on you, and that Terrorgeist needs to be able to get a charge off to get on your objective. Well, don't give them that opportunity. Just simply put yourself off of the objective because you're still controlling it. Anyways, little things like that.
Yeah, and then like the next tier of that is to be aware of the pile-in that's going to follow, right? Like so there's things like that, but like I think that's where like another one of the issues was exacerbated with the activation wars is like you're getting people with like piling in kind of out of sequence. And so when you're trying to like actualize and understand like 4 inches is 4 inches, right? Or 3 inches is 3 inches, you're like, oh, actually it's 3 inches plus 3 inches because of that pile in. And so when you're trying to learn these like, that sort of second tier of concepts with spacing. So a lot of players were, better than average complaining about activation wars, myself included. Like, like I shouldn't say better than average. I should say above beginner play level. Like getting into some advanced concepts where you go, like, now my measuring needs to account for 2 fucking pile-ins. Like having that moment where you're like,
absolutely.
Like I was so like my intent was obvious. I wanted to be outside of range of the objective for the charge, and then you piled in twice and wheeled the hell, and now you're like, look up to the sky, and that's where you shout Creed. 40K reference for the people. I rarely make those. But yeah, like it's. I think that Bonereapers, to get back on point, I think that the lesson they're teaching us, attacking soft sides is another thing. If I've got my 40 block frontage, like becoming more aware of frontage. It's not like advanced players, non-novice, non-intermediate players, they know this, but the average player, I don't think, has these concepts down yet, which is why Bonereapers are just like crushing you, but then struggling to win the whole tournament because they get to those players who do know these concepts.
That gets into the whole. We probably don't have time for it here, but I'd love to talk with you some of the time of how much weight to place on your concern about the casual, what we often refer to as sort of the casual player space, which has various subcategories within it, variants of profiles and interest and how often those folks play versus those who go to tournaments. And even, of course, there are subcategories within that set, but the point being that, there's one point of view that I sometimes have, I've heard others express it, where you're more concerned about that casual player experience than you are about the tournament player experience. And from that standpoint, but I don't actually know if that's reasonable. Again, we probably don't want to get into it right now.
It's a little of both, right? Like, I think that's the thing is like it's a little of both. And, where do you draw the line to round between the two? I think that's the question that's currently being debated, because it's in Bonereapers' case specifically, because I think they're right on that line. They're exactly on it. 60%. That's exactly where the line is, right? They're right on it. 70% is beyond the line. But right on the line at 60%. It's like, okay, they're right on that line. Where is it? And I think that, like, honestly, like, because they are on the line and over an extended time period, the player base does get better at games. I've watched it happen in real time with Age of Sigmar.
Yeah,
that you probably don't need to tap them too much in any direction, and they're just going to slide down a little bit as saturation's kind of like the biggest problem with them, I think. Fire Slayers were like a sleeper, because no one was playing them until they found out they were good, right? Like, no
Yeah.
one's playing them. Everyone was going to play Bonereapers. They're a 100% brand new army
Yeah.
to Age of Sigmar #1. And they're
Yeah.
they're a 100% brand new army in a faction that has an army. You know,
Right.
like we
Right.
you know, we had Nighthaunt and I guess Flesh Eater Courts technically, but like nothing really, you know, Nighthaunt kind of underwhelmed people after Grimghast Reapers got nerfed out of LON essentially. So LON was being artificially inflated by one unit from a kind of okay middling faction. Like, where did you think the Death players were going to go? What were we going to play? You know, stick with Flesh Eater Courts. That's a good option. Stick with Flesh Eater Courts. Fine. But what about the rest of us? You know, like, who wants something that's competent, that's good? We want to be in that 3-2, having fun with our friends mode. We don't want to show up feeling like it's a liability. Where did you expect us to go? Of course, we're going to go play the new hotness, and then we find out it's good. And then we find out it's a good, and then we get 2 free wins because like people haven't figured out how to beat us yet.
Yeah.
Like,
For what it's worth, I take the point on Nighthaunt generally. I think that is an interesting example of where there was more fruit to be bared, just a lack of focus on it. A lack of Johnny's really digging deep and trying to find it.
Well,
and it's happened a little bit more over the months. Anyway, when I looked at them, it seemed like a really interesting one from a Johnny standpoint. If you're wanting to try to extract more mileage, or as Tom always says, what is it? Gas and more gas. Let's get more gas.
Gas in the engine. Yeah, I still think Nighthaunt are good. I think that their stats belie their potential. The casino, you just have to like realize they're like they're basically a pure horde army now. And you just they struggle to get all the extra damage that army wants with it, but like 4-up unrendable is pretty good across a whole army. I mean, that's pretty good. And what's and the other armies that like are bringing their extra rend are now bringing it at a liability to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's wasted points. They like people have like bought that extra Runesmith in their Cities of Sigmar list. He's useless.
Or a couple of them.
Yeah, like a couple.
Lords.
They might as well be dead. It's
yeah.
300 points might as well not even be. You're playing me with 1,700 points.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like there's like Nighthaunt there's such I feel like people abandoned them a little bit before we truly got it, and I think I blame it partially on where they came out. Them and Sacrosanct Chamber both had they both had that first wave hotness into 2.0, right? Like that's what they had, and I just like feel like it got that sort of like initial hype buy, but then when the return wasn't immediate on it, or like players went, oh, Grimghast Reapers are good. But you know what makes them great is if I bring them back for 1 command point, and they grabbed them and they went and played LON. My army with them, by the way, which offended me, who just wanted to play with my fucking skeletons. Like, and then because you had to go steal someone's spooky ghost, my necromancer gets nerfed. Fuck you! Like, I'm not happy. Like, Grimghast Reapers like caught all of the attention, and people bought in on Grimghast Reapers. Even Nighthaunt players were buying in on them where they weren't a problem. And then you're told, these are not, you can't, now your army doesn't work anymore. And so now you have that decision point as a person who's on the Nighthaunt train, who is always just a good, honest Nighthaunt player, trying to solve the puzzle.
This has been one of the ongoing challenges with the nature of allies and etc. Yeah, it's where you can have collateral damage. This happened early on, for example, with Sylvaneth Kurnoth bows, where our Kurnoth bows went up in points, and it was entirely unjustified within Sylvaneth Allegiance, and that continues to happen. Hopefully they're getting a little bit better at this. At one point I had suggested to Ben to consider 2-point values, the Allegiance specific value, and then the sort of outside of that context value.
Yeah.
To reflect the greater value that you can extract from that war scroll outside of the specific allegiance.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, understandably, that muddies things up. You've got 2-point values at that point. It makes things, it just adds complexity. I'm not sure, what is a really elegant solution to that challenge. It seems like it's not as prevalent as it
make the
used to be.
allegiance better. That's really been the answer all along. Is just make the
Sure.
factions better.
Which I think, generally the
have.
trend is positive in that regard.
And then they went and released a book that said, "I play with your best stuff better." .book, Cities of Sigmar, and people love it. They're like, "This is the best book ever," and I'm like, "Really?" Because it's the Grimghast Reaper problem ad nauseum. It does it to Stormcast, it does it to Fire Slayers, it does it to KO, it does it especially to Sylvaneth, and you're cheering it.
That's I haven't heard a lot of critique. Maybe it's out there. I'm way behind on podcasts, but it feels like I haven't heard as much critique of that battle tome as I would have expected relative to the power that can be extracted.
I don't think people were critical about it because there's a wave. I do maintain it's the most important book to kind of come out last year.
On a number of fronts, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, like narrative, model-wise, relevance, like getting people into the game, building the world from like, hey, these cities exist now. This like they tried with Firestorm, but then they go, no, here they are, and here are the rules. Like that, it was so, you made it real. You galvanized it by giving it rules in a way that it didn't have them before. It's such an important book. But then on the other hand, I look at one of my fundamental angers, and it's a pure bias. It comes from what happened with LON and Grimghast Reapers. It happened from being, my best bro, Haywo, watching him with just trying to play an honest game with his Beastclaw Raiders, and then Mixed Destruction just ruining it for him. It's a little bit of a sore nerve when I watch the Grimghast Reaper problem happen.
Absolutely.
And I see that, I look at Cities of Sigmar and I'm like, that's what the book is. It's the Grimghast Reaper problem, the book.
Large,
but 4 times. My friend Sam, he plays Sylvaneth. And I'm like, hey, Sam, how about you go play Living Cities? And he's just like, every time I say it to him, he's just like, it's like I've stabbed him. He's so, just defeat. He's like, you're right, my army would be better in cities, but, I didn't want to play Wood Elves. I wanted to play Tree People. It's just...
It's funny.
So... And, of course, Cities of Sigmar players are going to see a problem. And, I just think that it's a problem, but it's not a problem, quote unquote. It's not a numbers problem. I just think it is a problem that occasionally occurs, and if it's unchecked, it becomes a big problem. And what's the fix to it? Make the stuff you're stealing the units from better in their own faction in ways that we started talking about, right? Change the points when their own army. I do like the 1 and 4 rule, though. I really do. In Cities of Sigmar. I really like that.
Absolutely.
With the Stormcast. Stormcast should be able to play in cities, and
totally.
so should those other factions. But it's I feel like the Sylvaneth player shouldn't be like, I should just be playing Living City right now. That's the, if your favorite thing is Kurnoth Hunters and you're I'll just go play in this other book. I don't like that. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So,
well, this has been amazing, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did this finally.
Yeah. No, this is great. So, real quick, just to reset, a couple things that you wanted to shout out quick. We'll go ahead and reset those real quick. It was the TO pack, the schemes. What is it you want to put on blast?
Yeah, the schemes. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, Facebook, email, tyleremerson@gmail.com for proposed schemes. Vince, Tom, David, and I were going to be revisiting this year. And then I got some tweets up at Scruby Wells on Twitter. You can see all the details in terms of some principles to follow as you're thinking about the tweet, and then the format, name, narrative description, and then the win conditions, the actual meat of the proposed scheme itself. Mm-hmm. And so that's the main thing, man. Yeah, we'd love a conversation about this TO pack that we talked about. I think that could be a really cool project.
Yeah.
And different ways to do it. And especially incorporating some of our conversation here, maybe other conversations that happen around recommendations in one hand, or not considerations, let's say, at a minimum, of what could make for a nice combination of scenarios for a 5-round event if you're really trying to hit certain principles. And again, there could be variants. There could be here's one version, with one set of motivations and interests, and here's another, and the other one might be where you get relocation orb and you get all the crazy that comes in, all the fun craziness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I just want to say real quick, we've got the Adepticon at home hashtag going on, so hashtag Adepticon at home. That's going on right now. Tons of content the whole weekend. I myself will be back twice more, 3 times technically, but that's Andrew Tolsted's stream, not mine. I'm just enabling him. So I'll be back. Tons of content creators. I actually think Vince is doing something right now adjacent to me on YouTube.
Oh, fantastic.
So hop on over, look at that. Coach has the schedule up on Twitter. He's got tweets automatically sending them out. So follow AOS Coach on Twitter is going to be your easiest way to stay plugged in with all of this Adepticon at home content. As always, you can @me on Twitter. And tell me how great my opinions are on everything. You can leave comments in the YouTube video if you got that going, and if you're listening back on like Anchor, there's actually a voicemail option. I'd love to hear some voicemails from folks, so get at me on that. Chat gang, you are the show within a show. Thank you so much for being on. Oh, before we go out, Scruby and Wells, you got one question here. What are your thoughts on a new Sylvaneth book?
Oh my God, that's an entire show.
That's
Jesus.
an entire show. Yeah.
Oh crap. Okay, so oh my God. Well,
The elevator pitch. The elevator's going down.
Yes.
You've got 3 floors to tell me. Get it in there.
Number one, you can even give us a third round of terrain update. For the love of God, just give us one terrain piece. Just one terrain piece, please. That's the reason why, certainly myself, and I think I've talked to so many people over the last 3 years who picked up Sylvaneth because they loved it for a variety of reasons, and then they realized what they got themselves into with all of these wildwoods.
Yeah.
And they're out. So it's kind of like Vince, he put it on the shelf and never touched it again.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm less salty about the new book than I think many people are.
Mm-hmm.
Again, from a fat middle standpoint, yeah, the stats are saying they're definitely of that fat middle.
Yeah, they're in the bottom side.
Yeah,
of it.
very, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think, again, if with more experience, if you get more experience with them, if you get a little more fortunate in your matchups, you can pull 4-1, and by some miracle, you might every once in a while, not very often, pull a 5-0. It would be very difficult, I think, right now to pull a 5-0 with Sylvaneth. It's been extremely rare since that book came out, and I think Laurie did it at least once. Laurie Huggett Wild is a really good Sylvaneth player in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to me, that's still a book, though, that you can absolutely go 3-2 with a variety of builds, and it's in that Johnny space of giving yourself a challenge to try to pull 4-1. And you might need to get a little fortunate with matchups and play well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Norwood's interesting. When I saw that book and it came out, it was all about Dreadwood because of the command ability. Mm-hmm. That command ability is the best competitive thing in that book, hands down, in my opinion. The capacity to just pick up a unit, sling it anywhere, outside of 9, paired with Spite Swarm Hive for the +3 charge, which can fail on a 1. Sylvaneth, part of the challenge with that book is it's a bit of a house of cards whenever you're really up against it, and that house of cards has to hold up, and if it doesn't, you can be up a creek and not being able to come back from it.
Yeah. Do you think it needs a full new book, or a couple adjustments would bring it back? Okay.
No, just some adjustments.
Just adjustments would bring it back.
Alarielle needs to be
400 points. And
a real goddess.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the fact she doesn't have a feel no pain, or something that makes her more survivable.
Get back up. I want her to have get back up. I think she should just be fine. 500 points, gets back up. Not even on a 4-up. Literally, when you kill her, she gets back. Whatever.
Get back up. That'd be cool.
As a redeploy, or whatever. If you want to make it fluffier, like a seed pod goes someplace, within inches, and then she re-blossoms from that seed point in a turn, whatever.
Right.
She's a goddess of life. Show me something on the War Scroll that makes her look like a goddess of life beyond healing, because guess what? I heal and I'm death. Healing is ubiquitous. So show me life. Show me a god, like the god. I want to see that. Like,
I never thought about that, man. That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, and it could be quite narrative oriented as well.
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that or a reasonable feel no pain would help. I mean, the thing why feel no pain, even if 5 up could make a difference, is the healing doesn't matter in a lot of context, even though arguably the healing can be even more intense, more significant with particular builds, like a null root build, than it was in the prior book. But that doesn't matter in a game that generally is trending toward more damage output and the double turn hurting even more than
and
it
more
used to.
mortal wounds.
More
Like,
more wounds. Yeah, so she can't hold up in so many situations. She's never been able to hold up that well, and I think it's probably worse now than it's ever been. So it was nice that they dropped her back from 660 to 600. So she's in some ways 400 points because you're getting
yeah,
Kurnoth or Tree Lord or whatever that are 200. But yeah, she just doesn't hold up well enough. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a cool idea. The heroes, I do think there's interesting elements with Durthu running a triple Durthu could be interesting. Maybe a quadruple Durthu, like a Bloodthirster type principle here
yeah,
because
yeah,
he got cheaper. Certain matchups, yeah, they might have the capacity to do enough damage, but they can hit pretty hard if you got the right combinations. Again, a little bit of a house of cards with those situations. Durthu needs to be wholly within 8 of a wildwood, so you've got to have ways of generating wildwoods to get the +2 on his attacks. Yeah, it's a book that really stretches you in your capacity to do well, which is because of my particular profile type. I like that.
hmm
I think they have a little too much of House of Cards going on though, and not enough. It's a little too fragile.
I would love to see, um, I would love to see like the one wildwood instead, and have them generate more wildwoods by affecting terrain on the table. It's such an easy change.
Totally easy
Why
change,
it's
100%.
and we've now seen
Yeah,
2 armies now that play with terrain existing on the table, like in the last couple months. Slaves to Darkness has their despoilers messing with terrain. You've
yeah,
got Seraphon now messing with terrain.
yeah,
Like
100%.
just why doesn't this army just mess with the terrain?
Yeah,
You shift the burden off your players to buy extra wildwoods. They can still buy
yeah,
sweet terrain for the table because if they're playing at home, right? Like they're still gonna want to buy
yeah.
and flood their own table. Like you're not like hitting your costs if they still play with terrain, but like
Right,
it's the table terrain. That
right.
my Bone Tithe Nexus. How sweet would it be if
Mm.
it's suddenly overgrown and it is a wildwood now? Like because you
Right.
cast a spell, or like you
Yeah,
throw an acorn at it and it just gets, and like mentally you have to imagine it becoming overgrown with trees and shrubbery and stuff, and now it's like
yeah,
it's helping me, but it's also kind of hurting me because it's a wildwood. That's cool design space. Like that's
yeah.
cool.
Totally.
So
I like that.
that's I think that would be like a really easy switch to make.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
feel bad the most for Ilariel over all the other gods because,
Yeah.
Archeon feels like the Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse when you put him on the table. Gotrek
Yep.
feels like the Slayer when you put him on the table. He feels like the goddamn
Yeah.
Terminator. Nagash
Yep.
feels like a 1,000 point wizard god of death. Like,
Totally.
like she's the only one. Gotrek, for as like I feel like he or not Gotrek, Gordrak, I feel could be a little bit cooler, but
Sure.
Ilariel's like really the one out in the rain. Like looking
Right.
in at the party that all these other faction gods are at, like just high fiving each other with like the party
Yeah.
favors and like passing around cake, and she's just out there like mopey.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, I mean there are tricks that you can do with it. I still love the
Mm-hmm. So
stacking that. Stacking Throne of Vines is nice with Metamorphosis because you're getting Metamorphosis or spell. You're getting more dice to roll as the turns click over. But again, she's at least a 400-point model that is having to stay back, trying to stay out of harm's way. You're not necessarily getting as much mileage out of the synergy as you used to because her command ability changed. Her command ability previously was extraordinary. That once per game, everything in your army rerolls wounds
mm-hmm.
until your next hero phase, so you can potentially get a lot of mileage out of that. It's not bad, but I don't think it's as strong. For that, it doesn't have as much spike potential
right,
as it used to.
yeah,
And yeah, there's a number of. I mean, for the most part, I still love the design imprint of that army.
mm-hmm.
The army doesn't spike in any particular area, but I mean, one of my strong biases, I think we might have talked about this in the past, are the toolbox armies. The combined arms armies. That's Sylvaneth was one of, I think, arguably, well, Stormcast was obviously the starting point of that, but then the next great expression of that combined arms approach. what was the original Sylvaneth list. It was essentially Durthu, Ancient, Branch Witch, 2x10 Dryads, 1x5 Tree Revenants, and then 12 Kurnoth Hunters in some combination, usually 2x3 bows, and a unit of 6 scythes. I like to do the 2x3 scythes for board flexibility. But that, just think about the footprint of that army. You've got 3 size ranges, big, or arguably, big Tree Lord dudes. You've got the Kurnoth, and then you've got your Dryads. You've got shooting, you've got combat, you've got magic. You're not spiking in any particular area, and then you've got the teleporting. That army and that faction had such a beautiful, sort of platonic type footprint to it, in my opinion, from a design standpoint. The woods were always the crux holding it back. So you've got to find a way to be able to maintain teleporting or generally maintain mobility in some other fashion. If you take away the woods and just have, like you were describing, one wood, I don't know if you want to make the teleporting contingent upon terrain placement. If you've like you were saying, you turn the terrain into wildwoods or something, or into teleport beacons, teleport hubs. That's a little too potentially random and dependent on terrain features. That's probably a bad idea from a competitive standpoint. But yeah, you need some way, I think, to maintain the mobility without all the wildwood.
I mean, you could just have them teleport outside of 9 inches. The game is fine doing that now. Like, we're just fine doing that. Yeah, like change host, shadow hunters, they have to do terrain, right? But Kinnerai, like the game is fine with it now. Like we're fine with things teleporting outside of 9 inches. As long as it's outside of 9 inches, fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. A while ago, when armies didn't really have the tools to deal with it, it felt like a bad thing for certain. Now it's like, you know what? If I've got 8 objectives on the table, I just need to cover them and get good at it. Like it's okay to feel that. I think that's one of the big takeaway points from this episode is it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Like it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Like just enjoy it. A loss isn't the worst thing that can happen in the game of Age of Sigmar. And if people are just playing their armies and they play how you feel if it feels right, and when you're playing the orcs. Why weren't people just the maddest ever when orcs were jobbing? Truly jobbing. Because it was still playing the way you kind of felt it should, right? Like, even when it was like the poster boy of the fat middle before the fat middle was coined.
Right.
You're just like, that's orky. And when does that disconnect happen is when it, like, starts to not feel right. And I feel like the greatest crime Sylvaneth has going on right now, I think, is it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. And that's hard It's more esoteric. It's hard to pin down, but I think it's the correct read. And
it's a little off. I'm glad that they took away that quick. Sylvaneth builds were essentially the same for a long time. 1-drop, alpha bunker. We loved Border War because we would plop wildwoods down on both of the 2 middles. We'd put a ton of dryads, wrapping Kurnoth hunters. And everything is in cover and getting saves, or we're throwing 30 dryads in your face, and you got to get through them. At least a lot of builds would not have any other choice, and that's the massive speed bump. That's -1 to hit and strung out across. It's all of that. A lot of that crap. It's a very good thing that went away. It's no longer as much at all really of an alpha bunker army. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. What is 1 step forward, 2 steps back a little bit. All right. Thanks again, Tyler, for being on, man. This was a long time coming. Don't wait 40 episodes to come back on, please. I would love to do another one of these. And chat gang, once again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. You're the show within the show. AOS Coach, you're a beast. Thank you for helping set all this up.
Yes.
And
Thank you, Coach.
I'll catch you all later. Goodbye, everyone.